clutch strap is twisted. We have to redo the belts.
This is 5 Live.
To head around and line up on the grid. They'll, I imagine, be starting mostly on intermediate tyres. We've got to wait and see. That hasn't been announced yet. It'll come in a couple of moments' time. And you can, you know, there's that famous thing, you can't win the race at the first corner, but you can lose it. I don't know, maybe you can win it here. Maybe Hamilton can win the Singapore Grand Prix by getting into the lead at turn 1. Maybe Sainz can win it by getting into the lead at turn 1. The last time there was a wet start in 2017, Fernando Alonso made a mega start. He was up into like 3rd place from about 8th on the grid. Yes, he then got wiped out at the first corner, but that is the sort of risk versus reward that could be key.
So that's everybody on Inters, everybody's on Inters. Gasly Tsunoda used, everybody else new.
Former F1 mechanic, this is high pressure time, isn't it? For a lot of these drivers, for a lot of the teams, they've had to wait patiently, but now we're almost at go time.
Yeah, I mean, you started off by saying this is going to be a sort of race of bravery, isn't it? It's a sort of he who dares wins, and that goes for the drivers, but as well as the teams. The teams have got to be really brave because the big decision, and perhaps a real key turning point in this Grand Prix, is deciding when to move off the tyres that we expect most people to start on, which would be the intermediates, and onto a dry, slick tyre. And it may be the only tyre change we'll get in a race, depending on where that comes. The timing of that, though, could be absolutely crucial.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the drivers, Mark, learnt yesterday a lot about this track. The engineers were monitoring it. They have had a little experience at this drying circuit, haven't they?
Yes, they have. So they've had a little bit of information. Went from dry to wet yesterday, as you see, but very different conditions in terms of the cars weren't full of fuel. And perhaps we go to one of those cars that didn't even have enough fuel in it. But very different today. It'll be loaded up with 110 kilos of fuel at the start of the comp, and that makes a big difference how the car handles.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Just a few moments to go. 1,800 lights illuminating this circuit, and Jack Nicholls, Verstappen, P8. Andrew Benson wrote about where could he finish, where can he finish?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you there, Jenny. He could win the Grand Prix. There's no doubt about that. On a race like this, he could win the Grand Prix. But Red Bull have not had the pace that they had when he won from far back in Monza and in Spa. So I think it'll be tougher for him today. But then I didn't think he would win in Spa, and he was in the lead by about lap 10 or something. So we've just got to wait and see. Hamilton's got a real shot at winning. Leclerc would love to win to get back on track. Perez has only won one race this year and has been in horrible form for the last 5 Grand Prix or so. So there's lots of possible permutations.
Well, nearly time to go. Formation lap is about to begin. Over to you, Mark Priestley and Jack Nicholls.
So 61 laps or 2 hours, whichever expires first, about to come at the Singapore Grand Prix. And the cars are now about to head around on their formation lap. The mechanics leave the grid now. Everybody is going to be starting on the intermediate tyre. The only real solution, the only real choice, I think, because it will dry up a bit. It'll take a while, I think, to go to slicks, but we'll get more into that as the race unfolds, because it's the start of the Grand Prix that is going to be absolutely crucial. 2:05 in here on BBC 5 Live Sports Extra, and this is the Singapore Grand Prix. Making their way around on the formation lap. This is the grid. Charles Leclerc will be on pole position. Sergio Perez alongside him on the front row in the Red Bull. Lewis Hamilton third for Mercedes. Fourth for Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. Fifth, Fernando Alonso. Norris in sixth. Gasly seventh. Verstappen down in eighth place. Magnussen ninth and Yuki Tsunoda in 10th. Stroll, Schumacher, Vettel, Joe and Bottas the top 15. Ricardo, Ocon, Albon, Latifi, the 19 drivers that will start on the grid. George Russell will be starting from the pit lane. They had a couple of reconnaissance laps to the grid mark. Verstappen went straight on at turn 7 at one point. And now this is another chance to get some real learning of what track conditions are like. And to be honest, it's not that wet out there. They're all gone on to the intermediates. This is perfectly drivable, and even the spray isn't actually too bad.
No, but as you said, Ed, it's probably the only option they've got, because as we saw yesterday in qualifying, certain parts of this lap can still remain very, very wet. Humidity is very high, still up at 82% humidity in Singapore, so it doesn't dry out quickly. And that means if you went for a gamble and put slicks on right now, you put yourself at massive risk at certain sections of this circuit.
So a long track this, a lap time, well, on the early stages of this Grand Prix, the lap times will surely be around about 2 minutes, if not a little more. So if you do 60 laps at 2 minutes a lap, that's taking you to the 2 hours. And so if we get any safety car intervention, then it could well be hitting the 2 hour time limit. The first race on the streets of Singapore since 2019 due to the global pandemic, which Vettel won for Ferrari. Hamilton won in 2018 and 2017. Rosberg won in 2016. So despite this being a bit of a bogey track for Mercedes, they've actually had reasonable results here over the years. And here Hamilton is lining up in third on the grid. Can Fernando Alonso spring a surprise from 5th position? And how quickly can Verstappen dispatch the cars in front? Because that's the other thing. He's come through the field well in Spa and Monza, but that's because of the straight line speed of the Red Bull being able to cruise past. That's not going to be the same here. No, it's not. It's a difficult place to get past. And look, Max Verstappen also knows there's a little bit less pressure on him. He knows he doesn't have to win this Grand Prix. He could take the championship today, but it's a real long shot and requires other results to go his way. But he knows that if it doesn't happen here, there's another opportunity next week. There'll be another opportunity the weekend after that. So he's got plenty of chances to championship. It's a question of when rather than if for Max Verstappen. Fernando Alonso. Here's his radio.
Number 350. Let's make it a special one, okay?
His 350th Grand Prix, Fernando Alonso, lighting up the rear tyres and weaving the car around. Everyone's on a brand new set of the intermediate. No, that isn't true. Sorry, Gasly and Tsunoda are the only two cars who are not on a brand new set of intermediate tyres. George Russell is waiting to leave from the pit lane. He qualified 11th yesterday, had a few technical problems which caused him issues and knocked him out of Q2, and the team decided to change the power unit overnight. He now rumbles out of the garage and makes his way down towards the end of the pit lane, which will be patrolled over the next couple of hours by Jenny Gao.
Certainly will do. No new inters for the AlphaTauri team. That's why they haven't got them on. They used inters. Waiting for George Russell to come down here. Just spoke to Christian Horner, and he said this is going to be a lottery. Whoever has grip and doesn't. The slippiest grid I've ever known.
Here comes the start of the Singapore Grand Prix. Leclerc on pole, Perez second, Hamilton and Sainz are on the second row as the race gets underway and everybody's struggling for grip. Eventually it's Perez who gets the best grip and gets the lead of the Grand Prix. Up the inside of Hamilton comes Carlos Sainz. Hamilton goes through the runoff area on the exit of turn 2. So Perez takes the lead. Leclerc is in second, Sainz is third, Hamilton fourth, fifth is Norris, sixth is Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri. He's going side by side with Fernando Alonso, who hasn't got the best getaway. Looks as though Verstappen might have lost a couple of places. He might be behind one of the Haas cars as they come out of turn 4 now. Flat out, right-hander, kink at turn 5, up towards turn 6 and 7, and Verstappen is side by side further back in the pack. There's an attack from Pierre Gasly to the inside of Fernando Alonso, and he's not able to get through, and there's a spinner into the barriers at the back, and I think it's Alex Albon who's gone backwards off at turn 7. He has managed to recover, maybe didn't even hit the wall there, but it is Perez who managed to take the lead off the start. It was such a slow getaway from everyone, but eventually it was Perez who managed to get away at the front. Verstappen is still going side by side with the Haas of Kevin Magnussen as they come into the left-hander, and he's got to be careful here not to lose a front wing or have a collision. Magnussen's still holding it in. Gets fed out towards the wall, and Daniel Ricciardo gets past him as they come over the Anderson Bridge. Verstappen will have the inside line for the left-hander of turn 13, but it's 12th place for Max Verstappen, having started in 8th. It's Leclerc second, Sainz third.
Wonderful start for Perez. He did everything right when the two Ferraris just bogged down. Verstappen qualifying back in 8th after the troubles of qualifying yesterday. This is what you get. You're stuck in the middle of the pack. The traffic here is treacherous. The conditions are treacherous, and he's making the right decisions, playing it safe at this point. It's a long Grand Prix, 61 laps, but Max Verstappen not with the start that he wanted.
Roar of the crowd as they come underneath the grandstand for the first time at turn 18, the 90-degree left-hander. Out across the start line will come the race leader, Sergio Perez, to complete the first lap. And he is a second ahead of Charles Leclerc. It's then a second to Carlos Sainz. It's then another second back to Lewis Hamilton in 4th place, Norris in 5th, Alonso in 6th, Gasly in 7th. Vettel's made up 5 places and is now into 8th place. 9th is Tsunoda, 10th is Stroll. Then it's Magnussen, Verstappen, Ricciardo, Schumacher, Ocon, Bottas, Latifi, Joe, Russell, Albon.
Magnussen has had Lewis. Understood.
Verstappen saying that Kevin Magnussen's front wing end plate is loose, and Verstappen's got such grip off of turn 4 that he just drives past Kevin Magnussen on traction and gets up into 11th place now. Lance Stroll is going to be his next target as he comes down towards turn 7. He's right in the slipstream of the Aston Martin. Stroll doesn't cover the inside. Verstappen is later on the brakes, and he gets through. So Verstappen now, after a difficult opening lap, starting to make progress. He's back up into 10th.
Who says you can't overtake at Singapore? Max Verstappen clearly now with the tyres fired up to temperature, and that makes such a difference to how the car behaves. That car's now coming alive, and he's finding his way through the melee of the mid-pack. The next person up the road from Max Verstappen.
I'm struggling with grip.
Just getting a look at the start again, and everybody got an even getaway. Hamilton got the best initial start, but then I don't know if Leclerc got some wheel spin or something, because he was way ahead of Perez, and Perez just like he got a extra boost or something, like a push to pass, and just rocketed up ahead.
The Ferrari definitely bogged down. It probably was wheel spin in the second phase of the start, and that allowed Perez, just with better traction, just to drive his way through. But yeah, Lewis Hamilton, a really great start, almost like he had to actually back off. He wasn't sure whether Leclerc was going to get out of his way or not up front.
And he tried to go around the outside and got pushed off by Carlos Sainz. Bit of wheel-to-wheel contact, didn't do any damage to either car there, and Verstappen was able to keep going. We're going to get a look at what happened to Verstappen. Oh, he had a horrible actual start.
Terrible start from Verstappen, so almost like it went into anti-stall. It may well have done, in fact, and he lost a bunch of places. Everybody just drove past him. Thing to do. He's actually done quite well to not get himself into trouble there, because he found himself so far back with cars all around him going much quicker that it would have been very easy to get tagged, and his race could have been over.
Sergio Perez, meanwhile, just had such a smooth run, didn't he, before that, before coming out into his next gear change, and managed to cruise past Charles Leclerc and into the lead of the Grand Prix. So Perez leads, a second ahead of Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz is already 3.5 seconds back. So those two are in a bit of a race of their own at the moment on lap 3 of 61. Hamilton is 4th. He's a couple of seconds back from Sainz. Norris is in 5th. Here's Hamilton's radio.
I told you about these tyres. No grip.
So Hamilton there, that insinuates to me that he wanted full wet tyres for this start of the Grand Prix.
I'm not sure. I don't think anybody could have justified full wet tyres here. I wonder if it's more about tyre preparation.
Sergio Perez got the best start, got to the inside of Charles Leclerc into turn 1, and the Red Bull man leads the way. Leclerc is second. Sainz got ahead of Hamilton. Hamilton's down to 4th. Max Verstappen got a terrible start. Started 8th, dropped all the way down to 13th. He's now back up into 10th place, but Perez leads.
It's a difficult one for Lewis Hamilton. Now, that radio message, pretty critical of his team, talking about, yeah, I wish you'd listen to me about these tyres. He doesn't specify what he's talking about, but there's parts of this circuit that are dry, or almost dry. They're not dry, but they're damp. There's certainly no standing water. Full wets would have just been destroyed incredibly quickly. So it feels like the intermediate tyres, unquestionably the right one. There are certain parts of the track where there are puddles that they're going through. There's no way it's slick tyres at this stage. So I wonder if Lewis is talking about something to do with tyre preparation, tyre pressures, tyre temperatures, how they warmed them up on the for the start of the Grand Prix, something like that.
Maybe he would have wanted used intermediate.
Could have been something like that. Could have been that. And actually what we saw yesterday in qualifying is Lewis actually did his lap on a set of tyres that had done 3 or 4 laps. That was his qualifying lap that did the decent lap time. So it may be that a new set of intermediate tyres in these kind of conditions don't offer up as much grip as a set that had been sort of scrubbed in.
Perez leading the way. Leclerc in 2nd, Sainz in 3rd, Hamilton 4th. Norris is 5th, 3.7 seconds back from Hamilton. Alonso is in 6th place, 2 seconds back from Norris. Gasly is 7th, Vettel is 8th. Verstappen is up to 9th because he's got ahead of Yuki Tsunoda and up into 9th position, with Tsunoda dropping down into 10th. Just getting a replay of what happened to Alex Albon coming into turn 7, and I think he might have lost all by. Oh, he did thud the barrier with the rear there. Alex Albon. I think he lost it all by himself and just locked the rears, but it was difficult to tell because we were riding on the camera helmet with him at that point.
I think that was right at the start, wasn't it? He just seems to go in quite hot and get all crossed.
Bricks are good at this level.
It's to fight another day, albeit right at the very back for Alex Albon.
Jenny Gow's in the pit lane.
Yeah, just having a look at tyres after you guys were saying about the used inters. Gasly and Tsunoda both started on their used inters and held their places respectively 7th and 10th place. So maybe that's something. And Christian Horner, when I spoke to him just ahead of this race, he said it's going to be a real lottery. Whoever manages to get a good start, and there are patches where it's better, patches where it's worse. And just look at that. It's his driver, Sergio Perez, who got that incredible start of Jack. It does look like he had some sort of magic button. It was like, zoom, he was gone. Impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just so smooth on the application of the power. He's managed to build his gap to Leclerc on this lap to 1.4 seconds. It's been less than a second every lap so far, but on that last lap he took 0.4 of a second out of Leclerc. So the gap goes up to 1.4 seconds as they come across the line. It's then 5 seconds back to Carlos Sainz in 3rd position, 2
Understood, we're looking.
3 seconds ahead of Alonso. He's 3 seconds ahead of Gasly. Then it's Vettel, who's only a second ahead of Max Verstappen. So Max Verstappen in the Red Bull has his next target, and that is Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin. Tsunoda completing the top 10 at the moment. We're nowhere near, it's not raining in Singapore, but we're nowhere near slick tyres at all.
No, a long way off. And actually, if you sort of forecast a bit forward, it looks like this was always planned to be a sort of one-stop race. That's the optimum strategy. And it looks like it may well just pan out to be that, in that we go from an intermediate tyre onto a slick tyre, and then probably that will come late enough in the Grand Prix to run right to the end on whichever tyre the teams go. So in terms of the overall strategy plan, it probably hasn't changed too much. The critical thing, of course, is going to be who decides to go first. Who's going to be brave enough to make that switch? And how's that going to play out as the race unfolds?
This break is just incredible. It's so bad.
Yeah, completely can see.
It's Charles Leclerc in a class of their own to some extent, with a decent gap, 6.5 seconds, I think, back to Carlos Sainz now, 5.5 seconds. Those guys are not going to be the ones who want to go first onto this. They're going to want to see someone else do it, monitor those lap times, and then from there decide when the optimum time for them to make the switch is.
Jenny?
Yeah, the rooster tails when the cars come down the start-finish line, it's so impressive. There's still quite a lot of them. Each driver has 3 intermediate tyres, a mix between used and new tyres still to go in this. But it's a really slow pit lane. It's the longest pit lane of the season, 28 seconds to come in, change tyres and go back out again. That's why it's determined to be a good one stop, because it takes forever to come in.
Well, the other question, lap times are still at 2 minutes a lap at the moment. If anyone's interested in the lap times, Perez and Leclerc trading for
Advance, you're breaking on, prioritise exit, there's limited prioritise the exits.
Perez, and that's all. So lapping very, very slowly. Verstappen's very close to the back of Vettel, but I don't think close enough coming into turn 4. The other interesting thing is whether, if it doesn't fully ready for slicks, but you still keep lapping on this sort of half-damp circuit, is whether these intermediates are going to get chewed up and you're going to want to pit for a new set of intermediates potentially. Or we saw what happened with Hamilton in Turkey when he won his 7th world title in 2020, where he kind of stayed on the intermediates till they became slick tyres.
They've got a decent lifespan, this tyre. Yes, you're right. If you run them on a dry track, let's listen to Norris's radio.
As you can tell, not drying up very quick.
There you go. That sort of helps us with the conversation we're just having there. It isn't going to dry up very quickly because of the humidity. Yes, it's all very well saying the temperature is right up at...
Feel I've got more speed. It's tricky to pass at the moment.
Copy.
83%, and that just means, as we saw on Saturday, dry quickly, and if we do start to get dry lines in areas but not in others, those dry lines will start to hurt these tyres. They'll have a lot of life left. They'll be able to go a certain amount of time into the race, and longer than most people would imagine, but there may well come a crossover point where someone's got to make the very frustrating and difficult call to make a pit stop, but yet not be able to go onto the slick tyre at that point.
Lap 6 of 61. 1/10 of the way into the Grand Prix, which is a measurement I've never used before, but why not? Sergio Perez is leading the Singapore Grand Prix. Mark Priestley, the former McLaren mechanic, alongside me, Jack Nicholls, and Jenny Gow in the pit lane in Singapore. Perez across the line does the fastest lap of the race, gains another 10th or so on Charles Leclerc behind, but the gap is still remaining at 1.4, 1.5 seconds, so Perez is eking it out.
My deal's not working. It says that I'm much quicker than that, but I can't catch.
Hamilton is 3 seconds back from Sainz. Norris is now 6 seconds back from Hamilton. Norris running in 5th place. Gasly, Vettel and Verstappen are all very close together as they come down towards turn 1. Kevin Magnussen's been given a black and orange flag, so that must be for the front wing end plate damage. That feels a bit of a harsh one, really. For a bit of a loose end plate, you have to come in and pit and change it. It's quite an extreme thing. Jenny?
Is it always Magnussen that gets this black and orange flag? It feels Haas and Magnussen get it all the time, and Verstappen was the one flagging it, wasn't he? Saying, "Oh, his wing's broken." Feels unfair to me. There we go.
Yeah, I think we've seen it somewhere before where it was a bit hard. Was it? It might. Yeah, I can't quite remember when it was. I don't know if that was an Eduardo Freitas race as well, because obviously 2 race directors this year, so you do get differences of race direction, and I think it might have been Schumacher in the other Haas who got his race ruined by it or something. The Vettel is under pressure. There was a brief yellow flag just then in sector 1, which I think is for Nicholas Latifi. Oh, it's Joe. Yeah, it's Joe who was parked on the exit of turn 5. So has he had a moment there, or has he just pulled off the circuit? He's at a bit of an odd angle, and Latifi's going slowly. So I think we've had a collision between Joe and Latifi. Latifi's got damage to his left rear, and those two came across the timing line. They were 0.3 seconds together. So
puncture.
Using my
puncture.
He's got a puncture, but I think he's also got suspension damage as well, hasn't he?
Well,
because the wheel is looking wonky too. So you haven't got to be Miss Marple to work out what happened there.
Yeah, Joe climbs out of his car, so that's his race run. He's parked it up. Now, what's going to happen here? We can't quite yet see whether it's well off the circuit or not yet. There's yellow flags out in turn 1 at the moment.
A lot of debris on track.
The entrance to a little Marshall's gap, but how far in is he? We haven't seen a shot to see whether that's affecting the racetrack yet.
No, at the moment they have not called a virtual safety car or anything. Leclerc and Perez have just gone past him. We're about to get a replay of what happened. Joe got the drive coming out of turn 3 goes to the outside, coming into... Oh, and Latifi has no idea he's there and just feeds him into the wall. A bit sloppy that from Latifi. Joe sticking his nose in an odd place.
The guy just fully squeezed me into the wall, guys. I don't know what is he doing.
Copy, John, I've seen it.
Yeah, Latifi had no idea what was going on there.
There's not a lot that Joe could do there, and unfortunately that goes down, I think, as 100% Latifi's fault.
Oh, I got hit. I didn't see. I have a puncture.
So into the pits comes Magnussen to change that front wing. New set of intermediates going on the Haas. Out he goes, back onto the circuit now. And they'll be hoping that a safety car will come now, and that will mean that they don't lose this huge amount of time. Obviously, they have to pit once you get the black and orange flag, so they haven't sort of made that choice. They didn't have a huge amount of window of when to choose it, and the safety car is deployed. So safety car is deployed because Joe is pretty much in the straight-on runoff area at turn 5, and he did his best to park it in a good place, but he couldn't sort of drive through to get out. So safety car deployed on lap 8 of 61.
So this is interesting because it's not late enough in the race to make your sort of planned pit stop. The conditions haven't changed enough to move on to slick tyres at this point. As we heard from Lewis Hamilton, we speculated earlier, it may not even be a big advantage to stick another set of new tyres on at this stage, having spent a few laps now getting these up to temperature. It feels like all drivers are on the right tyre for these conditions. So do you just...
Lance, that's a much stronger lap. That's decent pace. Keep prioritising exits. That's a good pace.
Pushing entry.
So they're changing the nose cone as well.
He's done. He's done. The mechanics at the back are saying, no, left rear suspension is completely cooked.
Yeah, you can see the wheel is actually hanging off. The whole suspension's moving with the wheel nut tight, so that is a clear sign it's not fit to go back onto the racetrack. But yeah, this is a safety car really that just neutralises a race. It dissipates that lead that Sergio Perez and Charles Leclerc had built up over Carlos Sainz. So good news for Sainz, good news for Hamilton, brings them back into play with the leaders. Good news for Verstappen, who's currently down in 9th place and now has the leaders' lead that they built up. And don't forget, Verstappen may still have some hope of getting a decent result out of today. So now he's no longer all of that time behind the leaders. He closed the back up, and there's another opportunity for drivers here.
Jenny.
Yeah, so Magnussen has played that really well. They got the black and orange flag, which meant they had to come in. So Joe had the problem. They took a gamble when the yellow flag came out. I thought we might as well come in now, and maybe if there's a safety car, we can then close up, and that's exactly what happened. So that was really fortuitous for Haas, bearing in mind it seemed to be quite a harsh penalty for a little bit of loose bodywork. But just looking at this, it now seems to me like this is definitely go down to a 2-hour plus 1 lap timed race with the safety car coming out as well. It was looking like that kind of already anyway. But do you guys agree?
Yeah, it's certainly looking that way, and I'd completely forgotten about the +1 lap as well. So thank you for reminding me. Thank you for reminding me about that, because I think I got caught out by that the last time it went to a 2. When was that? It went to 2 hours somewhere recently for the first time in a long time, and I completely forgot about the +1 lap part. I'm just getting a replay of Valtteri Bottas coming into the left-hander of turn 7. Russell goes up the inside. Oh, and then there's contact. So Russell out-braked himself. Bottas then went to turn in, thinking Russell had made the move, but he hadn't, because he was sailing straight past Bottas.
And that has all the hallmarks of the problems that George Russell has been suffering all weekend long. On Friday, talked about having this torque-follow problem where he lifts off the throttle pedal, but the engine is almost still pushing him into a corner. He suffered with it in qualifying yesterday, which cost him. He only qualified 11th, and the incident that we've just seen a replay of there looks exactly the same. He tries to slow the car down, but it just pushes on, and he has to really stamp on the brakes, lock up the wheels, and sails down the inside of Valtteri Bottas. Just a little bit of contact, but it looks like they both get away with it.
Could have completely missed his braking point as well.
He could have done.
there is that possibility. So, yeah, interesting for Russell. So he is back behind Bottas and in 16th place. So safety car out, lap 9 of 61. Race order is Perez, Leclerc, Sainz, Hamilton, Norris, the top 5. Alonso, Gasly, Vettel, Verstappen and Tsunoda, the top 10. Stroll, Ricciardo, Schumacher, Ocon, Bottas, the top 15. Russell, Albon and Magnussen, the 18 drivers still in the Grand Prix. Latifi out after a collision. And the biggest benefactor, I think, with the safety car really is Verstappen, because if he gets ahead of Vettel and Gasly, which he was struggling to do, to be fair, but he has less sort of net time now to lose to the leaders. But yeah, I think you're right, Jenny, that it will be a 2 hour plus 1 lap race now. We've got an hour and 40 left on the clock. Jenny?
Yeah, also worth keeping an eye on Magnussen's times because he switched over to new intermediates, so it'll give us a clue as to whether those new intermediates are worth much, anything, if people are thinking about coming in and switching tyres, or like Hamilton, maybe you prefer the used, goodness knows. There's lots of choices. You can go for an intermediate or an intermediate.
Yeah, the problem with trying to judge that is the track will be getting better anyway, and so it's difficult to sort of read too much into Magnussen's laps unless he's suddenly
Compare this track condition to qualifying. Where is it most similar to?
Yeah, like still the very beginning. It's like so many corners are still just completely wet. I'd probably say it's wetter than the beginning of quali still.
Soon Perez will start to bunch the field back up, and he gets to decide when to boot the throttle and get going again. And Leclerc's got to see this as an opportunity, really, as to get the lead of the Grand Prix back.
It's going to be all about firing your tyres back up to temperature again. Something Lewis Hamilton has struggled with, that Mercedes, over the course of the season.
And we've seen a lot of drivers, there's a real split. Some drivers going offline to find the wet patches to cool the tyres down. So it's that really interesting thing when you're on the wets of whether you are trying to cool them down or you're trying to heat them up.
That's right, and there's a very clear and specific way in which you have to build them up. It's a big, gentle process, building up the surface temperature as well as the core temperature.
Well, the safety car has been deployed after a crash between Nicholas Latifi and Zhou Guanyu. They are both out of the race, but the race is now about to get underway with Perez leading, Leclerc second, Sainz third, Hamilton fourth. Commentary on Sports Extra.
Right, here we go then. Sergio Perez leads the field round. Here's Lewis Hamilton on the radio.
Lights haven't gone out yet, it's just pulled a bit,
So Hamilton saying the lights hadn't gone out on the safety car and Perez was already backing off, but away goes Perez now. Alonso's dropped back a huge distance from Lando Norris. It's so spread out behind Norris and Alonso. Green flag racing again. Across the line they come, and Perez's lead is half a second over Charles Leclerc, but Leclerc isn't close enough to make a move. Then it's Carlos Sainz in third, Hamilton fourth. Fifth is Norris. It's 1.3 seconds from Norris to Alonso. 1.7.
Big split now.
0.4 seconds between Vettel and Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen getting a good restart, getting good traction, coming out of turn 3, heading now towards turn 5, goes to the inside at 5, does Verstappen. That was a bit of a bold one. Is that going to work out? Yes, it is. So Verstappen goes to the inside of Vettel at turn 5 and manages to make the move. He's in a hurry now, Verstappen, up into 8th place, and his next target will be Pierre Gasly. Not seen a move there before.
No, that was bold, it was brave, but he managed to make it stick. And look, that Red Bull seems to fire its tyres up so well. Leclerc already with the fastest lap of the race, so bursting out of the blocks very quickly with a car that seems under his control. Charles Leclerc tucked in behind him, and Carlos Sainz just behind him as well. So it's almost like a reset, right back to the start. Verstappen, 1 place back still. In fact, no, he's back up to exactly where he started the race. So all things square again, even though we're 11 laps into this 61-lap race.
Perez leading, Leclerc.
We need to move the overall beat out forward. Brakes feel very odd in the brake.
Felipe Massa's overtake a few years ago when he went in on someone all locked up and crossed up, but now Verstappen is up into 7th place. He's 3 seconds back from Fernando Alonso, who was very quickly caught the back of Lando Norris. He was 1.6 seconds back from Norris at the restart. He's now just 6 tenths back from Norris. Here comes Verstappen now, then up in 7th place, 2.5 seconds to find before he's on the back of that Alonso-Norris battle. But nice stuff from Max Verstappen, although he seemed fairly confident that Gasly wasn't going to fight him too hard.
Yeah, I mean, great stuff from Verstappen. This is the Max Verstappen we expected to see at the start of the race, but a terrible start from the original race start. A terrible start left Max 3 or 4, 5 places further back, and he seemed flustered. It took him ages to get himself settled and under control. Here, though, after the safety car restart, he is on it.
It was Monaco that hit the time limit after all that rain at the start. We completed 64 of 78 laps in Monaco, so that went to 2 hours plus 1 lap. Lap 12 of 61, thank you, Matt Q. Jenny Gao.
Max Verstappen was really cross yesterday with everything that happened in qualifying. He knew pole was there. If it hadn't have been for that fuel, he didn't have enough in the car, and those 2 laps where he just, backed off. He left here early. He's obviously come back very hungry, very keen to make up for what happened yesterday.
Incident involving Latifi and Joe is under investigation, and they are both out of the Grand Prix, so whether that'll be a grid penalty or something for Latifi for the next race or some such, we'll wait and see. With bated breath, lap 12 of 61, and Perez is still leading. Fastest lap of the Grand Prix on that last lap, but again, only fractionally quicker than Charles Leclerc, and Leclerc is going quicker than Perez on this lap. So those two still both completely pushing, and that's what I do like about sort of intermediate tyre stuff, is there's not much tyre saving going on here. You just got to go as fast as you can.
That's right, yeah, and it's going to be Sainz that comes under pressure very quickly from Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton closing in and currently lapping than the Ferrari ahead of him, just 1 second, 1.1 seconds behind now. Hamilton behind Sainz, and that's the battle for third place. That's of course where Lewis Hamilton started. Lost a position though to Sainz, but he can get that back as he closes up underneath the rear wing of a Ferrari. Let's see what he can do. Comes alive, Lewis Hamilton, in these kind of conditions, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Perez and Leclerc, again, about to trade fastest laps. Perez does the fastest lap, but then Leclerc goes quicker by 1/10 of a second. Really great stuff up at the front. The sound you can hear is Fernando Alonso, who's still trying to chase down Lando Norris, but he's 6/10 back. No DRS in these conditions, so some old-fashioned racing at the moment. Admittedly, but they can be a little conservative when it comes to reopening the DRS allowance. And Verstappen is now right on the back of Fernando Alonso as they come through turn 5, heading down towards turn 7. He's in the slipstream here, and I think he's probably a little too far back for a move into 7, Max Verstappen, and indeed he is, but he's putting big pressure on Alonso now for 6th place.
Yeah, I can't see it being long before he goes for it. Had a little look there, almost, but not quite from Max Verstappen, but he's driving aggressively. That was out of turn 9, in towards turn 10. Aggressive Verstappen, right underneath the rear wing of the Alpine of Alonso. Alonso won't make it easy. He's a feisty one himself, isn't he? We know that. 350th Grand Prix start for Fernando Alonso. That is one heck of a milestone to finish it in a good position, but he's got the might of Verstappen now all over the back of his car.
But still in a good place.
The championship, which could have been won today, looks like a tall order right now, but there's still some way to go.
Yeah, especially with the drivers he needs to have a bad day. Perez and Leclerc running in 1st and 2nd places at the moment. Verstappen right on the back of Fernando Alonso, though surely on this next lap he will have an opportunity. Perez is lapping quicker than Leclerc on this lap. He's managed to take a couple of 10ths of a second out of Leclerc in these first 2 sectors. We'll see what happens when he comes across the line. Out of the final corner now comes Sergio Perez, and the gap is still there at 1.2 seconds, so it grows by another couple of 10ths, but Leclerc is still able to kind of hang on in there. Is Verstappen going to be close enough this lap for a move on Fernando Alonso? We've got an hour and a half remaining in the Singapore Grand Prix. Onto the brakes into turn 1, and Alonso still holding on to 6th position. Jenny Gao.
Fascinating watching this battle. Bear in mind it's Alpine versus McLaren in the championship in a battle for 4th place. And both teams know that it's not really a battle with Verstappen. Certainly McLaren very aware of that fact. So I think they're racing each other, and it won't be long until Verstappen just pops past the two of them.
Norris is getting away a little compared to the two behind now. The gap has gone back up to 2 seconds. It was down to about half a second previously. Verstappen's still not close enough to get through up into turn 7. So he's really having to work this one, Verstappen. And I don't mind this. This is good stuff. I don't want him to be able to just ping open the DRS and drive past. I'm not going to get on my DRS high horse today.
It's a very difficult place to get past, even more so without the benefit of DRS. But this is what racing drivers are there for. So what their job is to try and find a way past, is to create those opportunities.
And we believe others might be starting to struggle a bit now.
Yeah, our tyres are starting to work.
Copy, that's good news. Keep pushing.
Car. It's only on Lando's car this weekend, not on Daniel Ricciardo's. He only had enough stuff to fit out one car. The next side of that, or the next batch of those components will come through for the Japanese Grand Prix, and Daniel Ricciardo will get them then. But it's all about design. It was designed to help them in the slow corners and the traction zones. And of course, that's where this circuit is, what all this circuit's all about. There's some big stopping zones, big traction zones, a lot of 90-degree corners. One of the reasons it makes it so hard to overtake around here. But it looks like at this point, those upgrades on Lando Norris's car are starting to work.
Jenny?
Overtaking threshold here, so you need to be 2 seconds quicker than the person in front of you to try and get past them. It's the second highest after Monaco. Not an easy track to get by.
That 15 of 61, Sergio Perez leading the Singapore Grand Prix, 1.5 seconds now ahead of Charles Leclerc. He has grown the advantage a little bit each lap, and he's just chipping away and getting a bit further ahead of Leclerc. Again, 1.5 seconds is not huge. It is Carlos Sainz 5 seconds back now, so he's unable to stay with the top two again. Hamilton is only a second back from Sainz, though. He's putting the Spaniard under a decent amount of pressure. No further action for the incident involving Magnussen, which I never even thought there might be. So there we go.
Contact at the start, very minor contact, but it's a racing incident. It's the start of the Grand Prix. I'm not surprised there's no further action there. So I think the two out front are really starting to show their pace. The big question mark in this race, we've mentioned it already, but the big question is going to be tyres and how quickly the circuit dries up. It's still very damp in certain places, but now very dry in others. The dry sections are going to hurt these tyres massively, but the wet sections, well, you need these intermediate tyres to give you any hope of having grip. But over time, through the dry sections, you're going to start to wear away the groove, the patterns in the tyres, and very quickly, an intermediate tyre can become a tyre effectively if you run it too hard in the dry conditions. So that's something that all of the teams will be monitoring very carefully. We haven't had that much long running. No one's got too much race preparation data, and certainly not in these conditions.
Try to take wet patches to pull the tyres down if you can.
So that's Carlos Sainz being told try to take the wet patches to cool the tyres down if you can, which feels sort of fairly obvious, but obviously they think Sainz can be doing a little more. Let's see what he does as he comes over the start-finish straight. Well, the start-finish straight isn't particularly wet, and he just sort of, he was driving along the real edge of the circuit there and thought about going through those puddles, and then thought, oh, actually, I don't know if that's a sensible idea. Verstappen still on the back of Fernando Alonso.
Cool them down soon.
Less than an hour and a half to go in this race, and Sergio Perez is still leading, and he's just growing his gap a little bit. 1.7 seconds to Charles Leclerc. Lewis Hamilton's right behind Carlos Sainz in the fight for third. Max Verstappen has made his way up into 7th place, attacking Fernando Alonso now. Full commentary on Sports Extra.
Yeah, so Verstappen closing right up again, but it must be so frustrating for Verstappen now. He's right underneath the rear wing, but can't do anything about it. There's not too many overtaking opportunities, is Norris?
Yeah, so the goal is to make these inters last longer than everyone else's.
Okay. Well,
what a great plan.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's not going to be eye-opening to Lando. So it's Lando being told by his team, he's basically got to look after these tyres, and the decision is, when do you switch and what do you switch to? We're seeing a dry line starting to form in certain parts of the track, but it's so treacherous in others that slick tyres right now is a massive, massive risk. If we give it another 5, maybe 10 laps, if you can manage to eke those tyres out for that long, perhaps it becomes less of a risk, it becomes a safer choice to go onto a slick tyre. But at the moment, we're nowhere near it. And so you need to manage the tyres. You need to not overheat them. You need to run through puddles where you can to start to cool them down, and just be careful about how you manage the tyre across the lap. And that is what Lando Norris is being told by his team there.
And he's in a little bit of a, not exactly no man's land at the moment, Lando Norris, but he's 5 seconds back from Hamilton. He's not fighting with the Red and the Ferraris and the Mercedes, but equally he's clear enough of Alonso in the Alpine that he doesn't need to be stressing them, especially because Alonso's in that fight. So he's kind of got the luxury of being able to take his time a little.
Tyres becoming more slick, grippy in the dry areas, becoming more and more slippery in the winter.
update on track conditions? Question.
There's some dry patches, but for me, it still would be impossible with the slicks.
Failed his MOT, and that's helping him in the dry bits, but hurting him in the wet bits. And if you change to a new set of intermediates, well, it would help you in the wet bits and hurt you in the dry bits. So it's a real tricky decision to make here.
It's kind of what you want, right? But only if it happens at exactly the right time. Because if the circuit really does dry up, going onto a albeit more or less a slick tyre, that one that used to be an intermediate and now a slick, that's okay, because if it's drying and getting drier all the time, that's not an issue. You can run it for longer. But if there's still wet patches like there are now, it could be a massive problem. There we go then, Leclerc putting Sergio Perez under some serious pressure, 1.5 seconds back, but the gap's been sort of more or less stable, just toing and throwing a tiny bit and then trading fastest laps. Fastest lap currently sitting with Perez. Leclerc just dropping away a little bit on that lap, but those two out.
We think other cars are stretching this tyre to get to the slick. Keep saving turn 13.
And Sainz not having the pace this evening. 9:45 now. The race was due to be finishing in 15 minutes time, but we've still got an hour and a half or so left of it. And Sergio Perez is leading the way, 1.7 seconds ahead of Leclerc, but Leclerc is doing a personal best lap on this run. As Mark said, Perez was a tenth quicker than Leclerc in the middle sector, so they're really evenly matched, these two, for pace out front. Lap 18 of 61 now started, and Leclerc does set the fastest lap of the Grand Prix. The gap comes down in the end to 1.5 seconds, so Leclerc just closing in a little more. Ferrari in the pit lane, all sort of standing up and having a chat. The mechanics, sorry, I should say in the garage, to be clear, they're all standing up having a chat in the garage. They're not in the pit lane yet, but that's very interesting how keen they're looking. Russell he hasn't caught the back of Bottas. He's behind Bottas for ages.
Okay, not far from slicks now.
Okay, copy that.
Not far from slicks now, says Carlos Sainz, Jenny.
Yeah, it's Carlos Sainz. The team's still not out here quite yet. I tell you, I was speaking to someone well in the know at Ferrari, and I was saying, what's it like? What's it like at the moment? Because it seems like every weekend there's something else. And he was like, it's true, you can't plan for it either, because it is literally something else every weekend, and it's demoralizing. That's so hard for a team when they've built such a great car.
Do you think they're second guessing themselves now, Mark? Like in a situation like this where it's drying up, and are they thinking, we keep messing this up, so let's do the opposite of what we were thinking of doing? Or here's Verstappen's radio.
What are your thoughts on conditions, Max?
Still too wet.
So Verstappen's saying it's still too wet, and he's the one that could probably do a gamble from 7th place.
Engine braking for rotation.
Don't talk anymore.
I've just made it out to be, but
it makes total sense. And what happens is when you have that many knocks week after week, it's your confidence that gets knocked. And if you've got a knocked confidence, you struggle to make the big decisions, and you do start to question yourself. You start to question, why is it going wrong? Is it that we're not good enough? Have we not got the right people? What's wrong? I talked about this on my podcast last week, where I equated it to, if you have the ingredients of a cake but you're missing one, you can have 9 out of 10 ingredients, but if you're missing one, it's not going to be very good. It's going to be average at best. You need all of the ingredients for that cake to make it the perfect cake. And Ferrari have got a great car. They've got great drivers. They've got great facilities, money, all the things. But at the moment, they're missing that confidence and that operational excellence behind the scenes.
Lap 19 of 61. That's Mark Priestley, the former McLaren mechanic, alongside me, Jack Nicholls. Jenny Gow's in the pits. What's your podcast?
Okay, as you can see, Albon in tyre trouble. Cars ahead of him now starting to pull away.
It felt fair. Sergio Perez leading the Grand Prix, not as good as the Checker Flag podcast, but he's on both, so he doesn't care. Sergio Perez leading and has just gone quicker than Leclerc on that last lap by a couple of tenths of a second. So it just keeps...
Do you know, we're in a frustrating part. It's been neutralised to some extent, haven't we? We've got blocks of cars stuck together where no one can get past, and it needs someone to pull the trigger and to be brave and to take a gamble. But it is a massive gamble at this point. Although we've got a dry line in places, it's a huge gamble for somebody to stick some slick tyres on right now. But that's what the race needs. It needs somebody to just roll the dice and see if they can bring it alive.
Surely it's Russell.
Russell was actually quite well in terms of pace, but he's stuck behind a train of cars. So, you know, it could be somebody like a Russell. That's what you kind of got to do. Verstappen stuck behind Alonso for such a long period of time now. Maybe he needs to just do something different.
So if the thing is for the front runners, if they were to pit, well, you'd lose 30 seconds, let's call it, in the pits. So if Verstappen pits, he would come out sort of right at the back of that Bottas, Russell, Albon queue, and then it's going to be tough. And also then it's difficult to make your way through the traffic because you go offline on the slick tires and then you're in trouble. So it's a tough one for one of them. Perez sets the fastest lap of the race again, now 2.1 seconds ahead of Leclerc. So some serious pacing coming here from Sergio Perez. He was 4/10 quicker than Leclerc on that last lap. Sainz is nowhere today. He's 10 seconds back from the front two after 9 laps. That's a second a lap.
Yeah, he's struggling, isn't he? There are 2 reasons it's very difficult to make a strategic call like that here. One is exactly as you said, there's so much traffic, you risk dropping yourself back into it. Here's Verstappen.
Massive lag on the uptrip.
That's not so good. So you're talking about a little delay for when he clicks the paddle on the back of the steering wheel to when the gearbox actually changes gear. So that's not great news for him. The other reason this is difficult is that there's always a very high risk of a safety car. And what you don't want to do is make your pit stop now and then a lap later, the safety car comes out. There's such a high frequency of safety cars here. You almost want to wait as long as you can in the hope that you might get away with a relatively cheap pit stop if we get a safety car or a VSC.
That 20 of 61. Or an hour and 18 minutes plus 1 lap to go. When we get into 45 minutes plus 1 lap to go, my brain's going to melt. We've got Sergio Perez leading the Grand Prix, Leclerc in second, Sainz in third. They were just sweeping away some of the water in the Ferrari pit box. It's looking very, very dry in some places, isn't it? And it's almost as though in some places you can't tell because they're not going offline, but it looks as though the whole track is dry. It feels like it's not the cars that are drying the track. It's not like a dry line that you sort of see traditionally.
No one on slicks yet? No one on slicks. I believe it's too early, but we try to clear traffic at the back.
So at the moment they're slowly appearing, but not very clear from our side either.
And that's,
it can take a while for the slick, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was alluding to, is Alonso saying, I don't see a dry line, but it seems like it's dry, but it's also too far from the slicks.
Yeah, and the problem is it's a street circuit, and it's a proper street circuit, this one. You know, literally we have cars driving around as there's some activity inside that Mercedes garage, possibly for a George Russell. Let's wait and see. The curbs, the white painted lines, the manhole covers, they will remain wet for a lot longer than the racing line of the tarmac. And if you step a wheel onto those, you've got zero traction. What's going to happen here? Mercedes literally bursting into action in the pit lane. It's got to be for Russell, surely. Hamilton less than a second behind Sainz. There's an opportunity if he can find a way past. He's closing up at the back of the Ferrari, but Russell stuck in a train behind Bottas and Ocon and Mick Schumacher.
Mercedes settling down again, so they thought about the pit stop for Russell, but he is carrying on his way by the looks of things. Lap 21 of 61. Perez is leading now 2.7 seconds ahead of Leclerc. So suddenly Perez has got quicker. Leclerc's pace hasn't dropped off. He's only 2/10 slower than his previous best on that last lap, but where the track's improving, Perez is improving, whereas where the track's improving, Leclerc is kind of staying the same.
Yeah, so Lewis has got exactly the same situation as Max Verstappen is. He's stuck behind a slower car, and yet there's no gap, no obvious gap for him to drop into. What they need is somebody in the middle of the pack to take that gamble, to drop out of their position, which might free up an opportunity there, and Verstappen has got past Alonso. We didn't see it on our screens, but he's got past.
Yep, Sonoda might be in a little bit of trouble somewhere. There's a yellow flag in sector 2. Sonoda's
Alonso
losing ground,
backwards.
and Alonso's off. Alonso's off the circuit. Fernando Alonso has pulled off.
It's going to be another safety car. That's exactly the same position.
Copy.
The engine's gone, and another huge hemorrhage of points for the Alpine team due to reliability, and Fernando Alonso's 350th Grand Prix ends in a retirement. I would agree that it's likely to be another safety car, at least a virtual safety car.
And we're going to get a massive flurry of activity. There you go, VSC deployed. Everybody is going to be heading your way, Jenny, very, very quickly into this pit lane.
Do you think?
Oh, they've got to. Come on.
Oh, it's risky,
22 laps into the race. We're certainly going to get some, I'm sure of it. Some people are so stuck. This is a cheap opportunity to put some tyres on. Some people saying it's close to slicks. Others, not so much. Let's see.
Just hear this from Alonso. Oh, just completely cut out. The whole car just turned off.
Yeah. Wow.
Blimey.
The reason you can't hear anything is because that's Fernando Alonso coasting to a stop.
Yeah, just as Verstappen went through, as I say, Tsunoda lost out in that as well. Is there much activity in the pit lane, Jenny?
There sure is. Mercedes are out. They've got 2 sets of slick tyres. So they're thinking they're going to get both of their drivers to come in at the same time. Are they just about to bring someone in there, their visors? Still no action, but they're waiting. They're waiting. And they're going back in with 1 set. So they're only bringing 1 car in, and it's
Russell.
George Russell as he comes around. Thanks, Jack. Sorry, George Russell comes round. He's going to go, I think, onto the slick tyres they're preparing. Let's see how they do this. A very ginger approach in because the apron's still very slippery here. They lift them up. On go the tyres. It's a set of slick medium tyres, and George Russell goes onto slicks. How will he fare out there on a very slippery track still?
The tough part is, for Russell, it'll be virtual safety car, so he'll struggle to get tyre temperature in. And because it's virtual safety car, he doesn't gain much ground. Like, that could have been gets on the brakes into the first corner coming out of the pit lane, just about keeps it together. But if it was a full safety car, Russell, huge slide coming out of turn 3. He has got no grip out there at all. This is very reminiscent of his Canada gamble, and we'll see whether it picks up around the rest of the track.
Yeah, Max. So Russell has just pitted for a medium tyre. Obviously, won't know anything until it gets going.
Yeah, that's brave at the moment.
Well, we are under virtual safety car conditions at the moment. It's lap 23 of 61, but more pertinently, there's an hour and 13 minutes left on the clock. It's probably going to run to time, this race. Perez took the lead at the start, got ahead of Charles Leclerc into the first corner, and that has been the order ever since. Perez, Leclerc, Sainz, Hamilton, Norris, the top 5. George Russell has just gambled to put on a set of the slick tyres and is sliding all over the place. Mark Priestley, the former McLaren mechanic, is alongside me, and it is a very interesting Grand Prix. Verstappen's got up into 6th place, but Russell's gone out on the slick tyres, the dry tyres, and he's really struggling out there.
He is, but it's the that we've all been waiting for somebody to take. Now we're going to get some information, and it's going to come from the Mercedes of George Russell. He's got to get those tyres up to temperature very, very quickly, and when he does, we'll start to see the big difference between dry tyre lap times and wet tyre lap times, and everybody else in that pit lane will be watching closely too.
The virtual safety car has just ended. It was brought out because Fernando Alonso retired from the Grand Prix, so everybody now is back.
So we pitted George.
In these conditions, you probably wouldn't want to go to a hard tyre like that. You probably wouldn't go to a soft.
As Leclerc's been pushing him, but at the moment the Red Bull man is holding on.
Yeah, just about, but they're trading fastest laps all the way through. There's really not a lot in it between them. They've dropped the sister Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. Right behind Sainz is Lewis Hamilton, who's been giving him trouble all the way through the race, but just can't find a way past. Hamilton 4th, Sainz 3rd right now, but that battle for the final podium position has a long way to run yet.
Max Verstappen in 6th, looking to make his way up the order. It looks as though he's not going to be able to win the championship this evening, but Perez leads Leclerc 2nd. We've still got an hour and 10 minutes to go here, Steve. 3 seconds the gap between Perez and Leclerc, but less than a second between Hamilton and Sainz. George Russell is coming through the first sector. Now, the quickest first sector that we've had is a 31.2 set by Max Verstappen. Russell is 3 seconds off the pace in the first sector alone, so we are not ready for dry weather tyres yet.
Well, we're not ready for dry weather tyres. What's going to decide whether this is a good decision or not is how quickly he can get them up to temperature, and whether that gamble of whatever time he loses in these few laps overshadows the loss of a full pit stop under full racing conditions, which is what everyone else might have to do. George Russell, of course, did that under the virtual safety car.
That 24 of 61. Jenny Gao.
Yeah, Mercedes looked like they were popping back out again, but I think they were just taking a look at what was going on to try and work out if they've made a good decision or not. Russell radio.
Must be spraying.
Russell suddenly going, is it raining? But the team is saying, no, must just be from some spray from somewhere. Do carry on, Jenny.
I think he's really struggling with the newly laid tarmac out there. It seems to be the bit of the roads which are not drying up as quickly as other of it, and they resurfaced a lot of this road before we started this race. So those are the bits that are really proving tricky for Russell on those slicks at the moment.
And we also know that the Mercedes generally struggles to get tyre temperature, and on a circuit in these kind of conditions, that's only going to become even harder to do. So he's got a tough task on his hands, George Russell.
Sergio Perez leading the way, 2.5 seconds ahead of Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz is in third. Fernando Alonso standing by the barriers, watching the Grand Prix unfold. Apparently, is he sitting? He looked like he was standing to me. Anyway, but he's watching. If it were me, 10 o'clock in Singapore, going to bed, aren't you? Time to head back to the hotel, but there we go. Alonso wants to watch his 350th Grand Prix finish without him. Lap 24 of 61. Obviously, if it was actually me, I would not be going to bed. I'd be watching the Singapore Grand Prix by the barriers, because that would be really cool. Perez does the fastest lap of the race again, 2.6 seconds ahead of Charles Leclerc. Again, only a tenth quicker than Leclerc, but manages to extend the gap a little bit once more. Hamilton still a second behind Sainz. Norris fifth, Verstappen sixth. Gasly, Vettel, Stroll, Ricciardo in 10th place, which is fair play to Ricciardo, because he started down in, I think it was 18th on the grid, wasn't he? 18th in qualifying, at least.
Yeah, he's done well, hasn't he? He's done well to find his way that far up. I mean, we are fastest lap of the race so far, a 158.3. It's still a long way off a decent dry tyre lap, isn't it, that we've seen earlier in the weekend. I know we've got more fuel in the cars now, we're on older tyres, so I get it, it's not quite as comparative, but it still feels like we are quite some way off the sort of lap times we should be able to generate on dry tyres.
Russell's just done a personal best in the middle sector. He's just done a personal best in the middle sector, and only about half a second slower than Verstappen's best first sector time. So
the middle sector's the driest bit. I think it has most dry sections, doesn't it? So that's where he should be okay. It's the other bits, so the high risk parts of this lap.
So I'll keep an eye on his lap time. His last lap was a 2:09, which was 10 seconds off the pace. Lap 25 of 61, an hour and 8 minutes on the clock. Perez is leading now 3 seconds over Charles Leclerc, so he's really extended it on this lap. He took a couple of tenths out of him, and 3 tenths out in sector 1, 2 tenths in sector 2. So the gap now up to over 3 seconds. Verstappen is in the slipstream era of Lando Norris in the fight over 5th position, but isn't quite able to do anything about it just yet. Across the line comes Russell, and 2:05.3 for Russell. Now, his personal best previously was a 2:02, so he's still 3 seconds off, but he was 4 seconds quicker on the last lap than he was the lap before. So the lap time down for...
Again, the track has done a step. It's getting quicker and quicker drive. Still a bit risky, but...
is off, and he is in the wall at turn 8, and he's reversing out. He's lost his front wing, so that will probably be maybe a virtual safety car at least.
Because they're going to have to get marshals on the track to pull that nose cone or that front wing out of the barriers. Albon's driven away, but he's left his front wing embedded into the barrier, so can't leave it there, can they?
No. Would have done in the olden days.
Oh, yeah.
Left Albon's car there in the olden days. Sometimes when you watch old Grand Prix, and they just leave cars like on the apex of corners if they've broken down. They're like, yeah, whatever. We'll see whether Albon decides to make a change onto the slick tyres and whether we get a virtual safety car deployed.
And if we do, this is every lap that passes, it becomes closer and closer to that switchover point. And even though we may not be there yet, and I think what we're seeing from George Russell is we're probably not quite there, but we're getting closer. George Russell.
So yellow's at turn 8, and we believe there's a front wing on track.
More people might start to see that being a gamble worth taking.
And this isn't meant to be offensive to Albon, but it was such a lame crash coming into turn 8. Got on the brakes, and then as soon as he was on a slightly wet bit, the car just sailed into the barrier. And also, meanwhile, earlier on, just before the virtual safety car which is now deployed. So virtual safety car out again. Yuki Tsunoda lost a load of places because he went in too hot into, I think it was turn 14, lost a load of ground. The car went into anti-stall as he tried to keep it out of the barriers, and then so that's where he lost a couple of places and has dropped down to out of the points in 12th place. Red Bull all sitting down still, the mechanics, they're not keen to pit underneath this virtual safety car, and we never got a reading on Russell's lap time because...
But he has set one of the little tiny mini sectors in the first part of the lap. Went purple for him for the first time.
Okay.
So he's starting to build his pace.
Jenny Gow's in the pits.
I am. Alexander Albon has just come in. He's got a puncture on the car front left as well, so they're going to replace his tyres. They're putting on slicks as well. The medium's ready to go. They're going to change his front wing as well. He grinds to a halt in there. I can't see much else going on with other people preparing themselves to come into the pits in this virtual safety car period, but front wing goes back on the number 23 car. Pretty slick done for them. It's a slick tyres as well. There's a little delay.
He's dead. He's done.
They're retiring the car.
The guy at the front right was doing the what that sign is, the one where you didn't do the thing over your neck.
Game over.
Yeah, the game over sign. So that's it. He's done. Alex out.
It's a poor day for Williams, isn't it?
And they're trying to pull that front wing out of the barrier here, even though the virtual safety car's ended. Virtual safety car's ended with the marshals still on track, so that's a bit of a shocker from race control as we go green, unless that was replay we were seeing of them stopping it, because sometimes the TV crew do turn things around on a replay, so that might have been better to do it sort of as live. So we'll give race direction benefit of the doubt there that was a little replay we were shown. Race getting back underway then. Perez leading, and Verstappen still very close to the back of Lando Norris. 0.4 of a second between them. Perez's lead over Leclerc is now up to 4 seconds, so he gained a bit during the virtual safety car period. Hamilton's still a second back from Sainz. Sainz is 15 seconds back from the front two. Nothing today, Carlos Sainz.
No, he hasn't, but he is a sort of cork in the bottle, isn't he, in terms of holding up Hamilton. Hamilton definitely with a faster car than Carlos Sainz, but just can't find a way past. It must be so frustrating from behind the wheel of that Mercedes. Max Verstappen really twitching. He's just sliding all over the road behind Lando Norris, desperate to find a way past. Same situation, really. I think Verstappen has the faster car, but can't find an opportunity.
So, we have got Hamilton's radio for you.
Just losing so much time behind this guy. It's really slow.
And that is Carlos Sainz that Hamilton is complaining about being stuck behind, but nothing they can do about it at the moment. Russell on that last lap, we were still behind virtual safety car, weren't we? So we'll see what his first sector is like this time, as we have just gone past 10 o'clock at night in Singapore. An hour and 2 minutes remaining in this Grand Prix. Let's get... And Ocon's off.
They are truly to keep the car on the road. They will come in, yes, but I'm 5 seconds off the pace.
So Russell's saying he will. The tyres will come, but I'm 5 seconds off the pace. Ocon is out of the race at turn 13, and that could be a full safety car potentially, because there is smoke pouring out of the back of Esteban Ocon's Alpine. Yellow flags waving at turn 13. He's off the circuit and off the racing line, but that's another mechanical problem for the Alpine team. Time for them to go home after a circuit that has brought them, controversial victory in 2008, wasn't it, with Fernando Alonso and the Nelson Piquet crash that brought them the highs of the 6th place finish in 2017 for Jolie and Palmer. Now they've got both cars out of the race.
Failure. Guys. Yeah, sorry guys, that was 3 laps, there was a weird sound, but...
I'm saying for 3 laps there was a weird sound, and now it's failing. The problem is he's rolling back and he's got fluid or oil leaking all out the bottom of the Alpine.
Yeah, and he's in a very dangerous position there. And all we're doing is we're racing under yellow flags here. We've still got cars. I think that seems like a pretty dangerous scenario to me. I'm really surprised. We've just seen the leaders pass turn 13, which is exactly where Ocon's parked in the runoff zone.
It's a bit of a no-brainer race neutralisation, isn't it, for Ocon?
I'm very surprised at that. I mean, yeah, very surprised.
Here's the sound of it.
Oh, yeah, that's a catastrophic failure. You can hear it.
Crunch.
Virtual safety car deployed again. Is anyone going to take the gamble this time?
Jenny.
Yes, they are.
Yes, they are, and it's Ferrari. But what are they doing? Are they going to stay out? They've got the intermediates. It looks like they're going back in now. What are they up to? Because the pit crew is still in here. We can see Charles Leclerc circulating on the cameras. It's another set of inters for them. But which car and what are they up to?
Sainz stays out as well. So Carlos Sainz staying out. Both Ferraris staying out. To switch on to a new set of inters would be an interesting decision. To lose track position just to put some new inters on.
Yeah.
Would be an odd call.
It's more like this point, I'd have thought, perhaps, if you got some.
Well, yes, I more meant a different set of inters.
Yeah.
But yeah, like for like is an interesting choice.
Lewis Hamilton's just lost a decent chunk of time behind Sainz. He's close back up again now. This virtual safety car can, if it catches you at the wrong moment, can make a difference to where you what your gaps are compared to the car in front. But
who did we see that within for Ricard? Was it Russell nabbed Sainz or something when the virtual safety car ended?
That's right. Marshall's on track then, just rolling Esteban Ocon's car out the way as he walks by, looking on. Very, very disappointing afternoon for them, and it's a massive. Just see this, a good old.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Smoke pouring out the back, a massive rooster tail of thick white smoke. That's a catastrophic engine failure by the look of it, like the ones from the old days.
Yeah, it sounded good on board, and it looked good off board as well.
From his point of view.
No. Love a good old engine blow. There's nothing exciting about an MG UK failure, is there?
So we've got Lewis Hamilton, I mean, literally underneath the rear wing of the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. We're under virtual safety car, but the second that goes green again, there's going to be an attack, I'm sure of it. Lewis Hamilton, you heard him on the radio getting frustrated. He can't find a way past the Ferrari, even though he's way, way quicker. But still nobody yet willing to take that gamble other than the Mercedes of George Russell of moving on to the slick tyre.
And I don't think that radio message from Russell will have given anyone else good confidence. And all these virtual safety cars aren't helping Russell either, because he'll just be losing tyre temperature the whole time.
Yeah, that's true.
We're past the halfway mark in terms of time, if not in terms of race distance covered. So it'll definitely be a timed race now, I would have thought. We won't know for certain really until the end, but it's looking that way. So an hour or so to go in the Singapore Grand Prix. Perez leading, Leclerc second, Sainz third, Hamilton fourth, Norris fifth, Verstappen sixth, Gasly, Vettel, Stroll, Ricciardo the top 10, Schumacher in 11th, Tsunoda 12th, Bottas 13th, 14th Magnussen, 15th Russell out of the Grand Prix. Both Alpines, both Williams and Zhou Guan Yu. Still virtual safety car is deployed.
This is what makes it so hard for teams to make a decision on when to go, because we've already had a number of VSCs, virtual safety cars, plus the full safety car. There's every chance, given that we're not halfway through yet, there's every chance we could get more of those. So making a pit stop now when maybe the track conditions are not quite ready for that slick tyre, you could really come a cropper when everyone else might get the opportunity to do it under a safety car that comes 5 laps from now. Here's Hamilton.
Yeah, he just brake tested me.
Hamilton complaining that Sainz was brake testing him, which I think is not quite, well, maybe not.
Yeah, it's very low.
Should we stop?
Go
for it.
No, I think it's too early. It's too low grip, we think.
They've got to take a chance to get past his car.
Very close to the back of him. This is the virtual safety car is now ending, so the race is about to get back underway, and Verstappen has just cruised past Lando Norris, and then he had to get out of it, and then he's had to lock up because he was nearly over his delta. That was a huge moment for Verstappen. When the virtual safety car is ending, Verstappen then has taken a big gamble, and it hasn't quite paid off, so he had to jump on the anchors to stop from overtaking Lando Norris. And anyway, is still in 6th position, and Hamilton isn't able to get ahead of Carlos Sainz. Bit dramatic there for Verstappen.
Yeah, he tried his luck, didn't he? And it didn't quite work out. It's one of those cheeky little things that if it had come off nicely, would have been just perfect, but not this time around. Jenny.
Yeah, the FIA have just issued a little mini statement, or an update really, just saying that there were no marshals on track in the previous virtual safety car when Albon went into the crash barrier. And it was just a replay.
Not testing the field dry, it's just turn 8.
Understood.
Themselves into a safe space.
It's very dangerous.
It was a bit dangerous. from Verstappen there when he sort of sent it past Norris on the straight and then hammered on the brakes. It was a real odd one. He sort of tried to take the gamble, and all the McLaren mechanics looked around a little bit confused, really. That was like seeing Mark Priestley on camera back in the day, just looking baffled.
That could have been an enormous accident. He came with such closing speed on the back of the McLaren. And I mean, I'd love to see a real slow-mo because he can't have missed the rear tyre of Norris's car by more than a centimetre or two. It was very close. But here he goes again on the start-finish straight, closing up underneath the back of the McLaren. Not close enough, though. Such a frustrating afternoon for Max Verstappen. The frustration, of course, started yesterday in qualifying, where the team effectively ran out of fuel for him to complete a lap. They would have almost certainly...
The old tarmac is feeling quite dry. All the old tarmac.
Yeah, it's good info, mate. Copy that, copy that.
Sixth place, and finding it a very frustrating afternoon, sat behind the McLaren of Lando Norris.
Verstappen very close to the back of Norris, coming up into turn 7, still not able to get through. Jenny?
Bear in mind, the only reason he made up that one place was because Alonso was out of this race, so he didn't manage to get past Alonso, did he, on track?
No, very true, and he's just gone a little bit hot into turn 8 and lost a bit of ground to Lando Norris now. The gap back up to a second. Hamilton still 1.3 seconds back from Carlos Sainz. Of course, there is no rule that you have to pit at all in this Grand Prix. Worth pointing that out. I'm not sure the intermediates will be able to do the whole race distance, but there's nothing in the rules that says you are not allowed to do the whole race distance on a set of intermediate tyres.
No, that's true. The rule that says you have to choose 2 different types of tyre only applies when you're using... when it's
We must be so far behind now.
harder and harder to cope. Already you've seen a couple of drivers just starting to complain that they've actually run out of the grooves in those intermediate tyres. They're almost effectively slicks right now, and yet the rest of the circuit's not yet dry enough for the full slick. Max Verstappen still sliding around all over the place behind Lando Norris. It's treacherous conditions in part. The curbs, the manhole covers, the white lines, the painted lines that the traffic runs over on any normal weekday, making it very, very difficult if you step offline.
That 32 of 61, 53 minutes to go. Max Verstappen closing in again on the back of Norris as they come down into turn 1, but 0.6 of a second behind. All over the curbs and then wrestling it into the left-hander of turn 3. Perez's lead is 3 seconds over Charles.
We must be so far behind now.
It only takes one safety car to get back into the game.
Perez being told, I think there, that Russell was still struggling. That 32 of 61. And yeah, Leclerc on that. We are past the half race distance, 52 minutes to go, and Perez is still leading, but Leclerc was 1.2 seconds quicker than him on that last lap. Lewis Hamilton still can't get past. Sainz in the fight for 3rd place. Fernando Alonso has retired from the race, so Verstappen is now up into 6th position, but Perez leading still. Yeah, it's a quick lap on that last lap, and Verstappen is as close as he's been before to Lando Norris, coming down in towards turn 14. Still not quite close enough. Little lock up from Verstappen, sends it in too deep, and that'll cost him a bit of ground as he gets on the wet part of the track and drops back again.
It's so dangerous for moves like this, where you need to be aggressive. You need to take those opportunities, even a half opportunity. That's what we're used to seeing Max Verstappen doing. Big lunge down the inside into a corner, but on a circuit like this, in these conditions, that becomes so difficult, so dangerous to do, that you can't take that amount of risk. And that's one of the reasons that we're seeing this neutralisation of the Grand Prix. We're seeing Max stuck behind Lando Norris. We're seeing Lewis Hamilton stuck behind Carlos Sainz, and the same applies further down the field as well. This is a frustrating race, and we're just waiting for that moment, the moment that could turn this race on its head, when the first people decide it's quick enough to move on to slick tyres. We've got George Russell, the only driver at the moment on the medium tyre. Everybody else is on the intermediate. No one quite yet willing to take that risk.
That's 33 of 61. Hamilton and sends it in too deep.
Feedback on conditions. Russell's lap times are getting close now.
Yeah, I think we're getting there pretty close. Any time now, either this lap or the next lap.
Sights. It's not 7, my apologies. It's up at the Singapore. No, it is at turn 7, yeah. It is at turn 7, and he's going to come out just in front of Max Verstappen. There might not even be any damage to that car for Lewis Hamilton, honestly, because he went in so straight on. Maybe the front left wing end plate is a bit bent, but overall he might have got away with that Hamilton there.
Well, maybe just about, but he has lost positions, of course. Norris now up to P4, Hamilton down to P5. Now Max Verstappen doesn't have Lando Norris in front of him. In fact, the front wing end plate on the left-hand side of Lewis's car definitely damaged and hanging off. We saw a black and orange flag for Max Verstappen for a similar thing earlier.
Magnussen.
Sorry.
Opposite Red Bull.
Okay, here we go. We're going to get some activity. That's Charles Leclerc being told, do the opposite. Do the opposite of Sergio Perez. Jenny, what's happening down there?
Well, Red Bull are not out, whatever they're doing, so I don't know if it was just a bluff, because it looks like Ferrari are going back in. Maybe they expected a safety car because of Hamilton, and it's not come.
I think
my word, this is tense for the teams down here.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it was there, Jenny. I think they saw Hamilton flying into the barriers. Looked as though that would be him out of the race, but it isn't. I think you're right about Mark, about the black and orange flag, because Magnussen got one for a front wing end plate that was a lot less wobbly. So this could be Hamilton out of the running at the front of the Grand Prix. Here's Verstappen's radio about to complain about it.
Yeah, the head plate is completely loose, mate. It's dangerous, it's going to fly up.
And Hamilton is struggling to keep the car on the road now as he locks up the brakes coming into the first corner. Pierre Gasly has pitted. Then, so we'll keep an eye on him. Russell did his personal best lap of the race on that last lap and is setting the fastest lap of the race on this lap. The slick tyres are the way to go now. We're at the crossover point with 49 minutes plus a lap to go. There's sparks flying from Hamilton's front wing.
He's going to lose the front wing. That has to be brought into the pits, that car.
The front wing is going to fall off.
Understood, Max.
He's right, and that's a big chunk. If that comes off, it is dangerous. This is not a rule that's just there frustratingly for everybody. It's there for a good reason.
So, that 34 of 6. This appears like it's going to be the crossover time for everybody to come in and change onto the slick tyres. But the question's going to be, how quickly can you get the tyres up to temperature? Because he's been on these tyres, George Russell, for an awful long amount of time before they've kind of come in, let's say. So if the warm-up's too long, you might not quite gain what you want. Is any of the leaders coming into the pits? Jenny Gow's down there.
Yes, and I think they're going to bring a Ferrari in, although we've seen this bluff and bluff again. I think Mercedes are maybe thinking who's going to come in. Yeah, we've got number 16, Charles Leclerc, comes into the pit lane, and we've already had a flurry of activity. But they've got these slick tyres, medium tyres, and they are ready to go. Let's see what happens. Leclerc pulls in, 22 men gather around the car. They hold it in place. It's a relatively conservative pit stop. They let him go, no major drama, but I don't think it's the fastest one I've seen. Now Mercedes are ready as well to welcome. We've already had Haas of Magnussen. We've had the two Alpha Tauris in as well. And yeah, Mercedes are now getting ready as well with another set of slicks. And I think they'll do a wing change as well. Hamilton. So a slightly longer stop for Hamilton when he comes in. Yeah, and he's in now. Yep, he is in now. That front wing end plate is just dangling around. He'll come in. He'll put on the brakes. It'll be tough because obviously they normally put the jack under that wing to lift it up. And it's a little bit wobbly. So they try and do it manually. That's what they're doing now. They unwind the hooks. They let it go out. And they put the new front wing onto the car. They'll do up those clips to make sure it's in place. They just test it, and off he goes on a slick tyre for Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes.
So is this the race-winning moment for Charles Leclerc? He's gone out on the slick tyres. How quickly can he get up to temperature with those? And how quickly can he start setting quick lap times? And do Red Bull respond immediately? Do they give it a couple of laps to see what Leclerc's first lap time is like? We'll get a middle sector in a moment. Hamilton back out onto the circuit. Lap 35 of 61. He's come out behind Sebastian Vettel. So that shows you how much time he's lost. He's come out behind Vettel, Hamilton. Big slide as he gets on the power. Coming out of turn 3, Charles Leclerc coming through the middle sector now. It was a very slow stop, by the way, for Ferrari. It was like 5.3 seconds.
He came in long, missed his marks.
Okay, so that's the problem. Through the middle sector, it's not that quick for Leclerc. He's a second and a half slower than Sergio Perez. So
Perez in now, responding.
Okay, so I don't think this is going to be enough for Leclerc to get the undercut, but he might arrive at Perez with hotter tyres that he is a bit more up to speed with. It's a very quick pit stop from Red Bull as well. I don't think Leclerc is going quick enough to undercut the Red Bull here.
And that pit stop could actually make the difference. 2.8 seconds for Perez as opposed to around 5 seconds for the Ferrari. That is just a big chunk of time that you don't need to lose from the position of Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz also now into the pit lane.
Leclerc coming around the final couple of corners. Here's Verstappen's radio.
Opposite Norris.
And Verstappen will do the opposite to whatever Norris does. Norris stays out and Verstappen comes into the pit lane. So Leclerc down in towards the first corner. He is only just ahead of Lando Norris, actually, and Norris is trying to fight with Leclerc and get ahead of him because the slick tyres were quick, but are they quick enough? And I think Tsunoda's off. Tsunoda's off at turn 10. Yellow flags are out and Tsunoda's buried in the barriers, and if he can't reverse out, that could be a full safety.
Confirm, staying out. Are you okay to do one more?
Well, yeah, I'm just going to have traffic.
Get a cheaper pit stop than the rest.
Switch off, engine off.
Engine off, Tsunoda out. Will there be a full safety car? And Perez is leading the Grand Prix. Leclerc is trying to close in on him, but that's all going to get neutralized if the safety car is deployed. A shake of the head from Yuki Tsunoda. He had just left the pit lane on a set of the medium tires. Safety car deployed.
Lando Norris then the big winner there. They're one of the only guys not to stay out. Daniel Ricciardo as well, currently 5th place, having not changed his tyres. And now we've got a full safety car with an opportunity for those guys to save a lot of time.
Is Norris going to come out still in 3rd here? He's 18 seconds ahead of Sainz when it was called, and we'll see. Norris has got a chance of emerging in 3rd place. So Yuki Tsunoda up at turn 10, coming up towards the left-hander, up into 6th gear, onto the brake, and steam straight into the wall.
It's always the risk when the whole field suddenly goes on the slick tyres. It's the biggest risk for any opportunity, anything to go wrong. Safety cars, virtual safety cars, and it's exactly what we've seen. And McLaren may have played a masterstroke here with both cars. Could Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo suddenly find themselves right up at the thick end of this race as George Russell makes another pit stop?
Jenny.
Yeah, so George Russell has come in on another set of slicks. He changed on lap 22, and if I duck in, I can't see a board at the moment. We're on lap 36. Lando Norris didn't pit yet, and if he comes in under the safety car, it's half the time that it would normally be, somewhere around the 15-second mark rather than 28, and he into the pit lane now. Is this a McLaren stroke of genius? Is this a little bit of luck that they needed on a day when their rivals for 4th in the championship have got nothing but a double DNF? So Norris into the pit lane. They've got a set of the slick tyres ready for him, and he will come in. This is such a cheap pit stop for them. It'll gain them about 15 seconds if they can do it well. They've done it well. He's on the medium slick tyres. He's back out. You've got to nurse that car to get those tyres up to temperature.
Sainz is coming around the final corner, and I think he is going to get Norris. Yes, he is. So Sainz just gets Lando Norris, but that is now 4th place. Ricciardo had stayed out as well, so we'll see where Ricciardo emerges in all of this. He's only just come into the pits, but he might come out just behind Max Verstappen here and ahead of Stroll and Vettel and Hamilton and Gasly, so Ricciardo could be a huge winner here also. And it's soft tyres on for Daniel Ricciardo, so that's an aggressive one with 42 minutes of the race remaining. So safety car deployed. I'll give you the full order once it's all shaken out, once Ricciardo has made his way out of the pits. And I think he is going to get ahead of Stroll here. So Ricciardo's going to be in 6th place. So the order, he was 11th before everybody started retiring. Sorry, he was 10th, wasn't he, before everybody started retiring? Now he's up into 6th place on the soft tyre. So safety car deployed. The order is thus: Perez, Leclerc, Sainz, the top 3. Norris in 4th, Verstappen 5th. Ricciardo 6th, Stroll 7th, Vettel 8th, Hamilton 9th, Gasly 10th.
Sorry about that, guys. Time, man.
Don't sweat it, Lewis. We're still in it.
Hamilton apologising to the team. He's now the 9th place. Gasly 10th. Schumacher, Bottas, Magnussen and Russell, the 14 runners. Somehow Russell is still in last position, despite being the first driver to go onto the slicks, but it was just too early, basically.
Yeah, it was too early, and he's had to make another pit stop. So any advantage he may have gained has been negated by having to make a second pit stop, but almost everybody else just makes one. So it's Mercedes, actually, with both cars, the big losers out of that whole section of the Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton finding his way into the wall, very slow pit stop, having to change his nose cone as a result of that. That puts...
Okay, everyone now on slicks. Daniel and Bottas on soft, everyone else on medium.
Mercedes, when the promise was there for such a good result for at least one of those cars.
So the car of Yuki Tsunoda is hoisted up and is now being craned away. And the marshals will have a little look at the Tech Pro barrier, or as Andrew Benson would have us call it, the crash absorbent, impact absorbent barrier, or whatever its you know, non-denominatory name is, as Tsunoda's car is now cleared, but we'll see whether there is any damage to those barriers. Across the line they come, and Perez is saying to the safety car, Bernd Mailander, can you go a bit quicker here? He's waving in the cockpit because these are all on brand new dry tyres on a damp track, and the temperature is just going to be plummeting.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that safety car is literally on its door handles. That is going around corners as fast as it can. It's literally hanging out everything it's got, but it's nothing a Formula One car, and these F1 cars of today need to be on the edge to keep the tyre temperature, and as soon as you lose that tyre temperature, it can spiral out of control.
I think the problem is, I don't think it is going flat chat at the moment, is it? I think Bernd Mailander, he could be going quicker than this. I think he's backing the pack up, punching the field up, and not going full speed. And I think that's Perez's frustration at the moment. Jenny.
I was speaking to Bernd Mailander yesterday, actually, and he was explaining that he gets so much grief from the drivers, and he's just listening to race control like we all are, and there's communication between him and them, and they tell him and dictate to him what they need him to do. But he says there's nothing worse than seeing in your mirrors an angry race driver bearing down on you, wanting you to go faster. They normally go around 150 clicks out there in the safety car. It does look like they're going a little bit slower. And he told me an interesting fact, they have 2 safety cars in case one runs out of fuel. They had to refuel in 2007 in Fuji. I never knew that. It's very cool.
Yeah. Also, if one has an accident, do you remember, I forget, Jack might be able to tell me, which race was it where the safety car pulled up and somebody took its door off as they got out?
Oh, that was, no, I've got no idea. 2001 Brazil, Enrique Bernoldi in the Arrows.
Could well be, yeah. I think you could be right.
Or he had stopped. Maybe they were looking after him and a Sauber came through and took the door off.
Yeah.
I think they were looking after an Arrows and the Sauber came through and took the door. It might have been, was it Fisichella?
Can't remember. I just remember it happening.
Heidfeld. I think it might have been Heidfeld.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Safety car still deployed though. And yeah, they're trying to bunch the field up at the moment. I'm going to look up what that incident was before all of you on hashtag BBCF1 tell me what it was.
What I remember about that incident is thinking, at the end of the day, I remember walking down the pit lane, seeing the safety car mechanics flat out, changing the door on the safety car, whereas normally they were sat there with their feet up reading newspapers and used to give us a load of grief for being busy. Michel Leclerc.
And they will need to repair the barrier.
So red flag?
No, we believe it will be a longer safety car.
For those of you tuning in to hear the cricket here on Sports Extra, we will be going there at the end of the Grand Prix, but you can hear England versus Pakistan on the BBC Sport website if you so wish. So the cricket's on the BBC Sport website. It'll be coming here in about 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes, let's say. And but yeah, it's on the BBC Sport website right now. They do need to repair the barrier, according to the Ferrari team. They will have been told that by race control. But they're not going to red flag it. They're just going to keep a longer safety car period, which is interesting. This is where anyway, there needs to be like a mini red flag thing, in my opinion. There needs to be just let's stop on the grid, wait for 10 minutes, stop the clock, and then let's get going again. Not this full red flag. Everybody has to get out the cars. We have to do a 10-minute warning to restart. Just everybody pull over, wait for a bit, and then we'll get going again. Here's Tsunoda's radio.
Sorry.
Apologising for crashing out of the race.
Yeah, another difficult afternoon.
Oh, and it was Heidfeld. It was Heidfeld, and
well done.
I think it was Bernoldi in the Arrows that had crashed, but I'm not sure who the Arrows was.
Safety car in this lap. So we're going to go racing again at the end of this lap. It's Perez who's tucked up behind it right now. He'll take control of the field with Charles Leclerc tucked in just about a second behind him right now. Carlos Sainz will nestle in behind the other Ferrari. And then it's Lando Norris in P4. Max Verstappen in 5th place. And Daniel Ricciardo, the other McLaren, after a masterstroke, leaving their pit stops until later, until we got a safety car, full safety car from the accident with Tsunoda, and taking a cheaper pit stop than everybody else, catapulting him up the field from 10th place to 6th. But it's going to be Perez who will take control of this field and restart this race shortly.
Okay, respect the distance with the safety car.
So Perez being told to respect the distance with the safety car, which I don't know which way they're referring, because Hamilton complained that he backed off too early on the previous safety car restart, and so the team weren't clear whether they weren't saying don't drop too far back or remember to stay too close or whatever.
Could have been an old message when he was right up behind him, you never know. But here we go. Around half a lap to go now. Safety car's going to peel in. Perez is going to back the field up and take control. And then it's going to be a game of reactions. Perez will get the opportunity to go first.
Can you check the right rear temperature with the brake? I see a tear of it hanging in there.
Yep, understood. All okay for the moment, Max.
All okay for the moment, Max, is the message.
It's pretty observant, isn't it? He's looking in his mirrors, seeing a tear off, a visor tear off, stuck in the right rear brake duct of his car. That's pretty impressive. Right, here we go. Sergio Perez breaks free, and off he goes. A decent exit out of the final corner onto the start-finish straight, weaving his tyres down into turn 1. Everybody following suit. Leclerc just behind, and it's Max Verstappen who's the closest to an overtaking opportunity here, right up underneath the rear wing of Lando Norris.
They're all weaving on down the start-finish straight to try and get some temperature into those tyres. They've been barely out on those tyres, so it's all a voyage into the unknown for all of these drivers, because they had barely done any running before the safety car was deployed. Perez has got an 0.8 of a second lead over Leclerc. It's 1.2 seconds back to Sainz in third, and here comes Verstappen on the attack. Huge lockup, and Verstappen goes straight on, down into turn 7. He went for it, ambitious, but offline on the wet tyre. He won't be winning the championship today with moves like that. Verstappen drops down to 8th place, comes back on circuit just ahead of Lewis Hamilton, and that might have ruined his tyres as well. Went for the attack on Lando Norris, sent steaming in, huge lockup, and he went straight on. 33.5 minutes to go. Perez leading, Leclerc second, Sainz third, Norris is now 4th. Hamilton is trying to attack Verstappen now for 8th position.
And look at that, after all these little incidents happening, it's McLaren who sit 4th and 5th. Yeah. Nobody would have said that at the start of today.
And no points for Alpine.
Absolutely, yeah, in that battle, that's a plus McLaren if it stays this way. But now Verstappen frustrated, he'll be angry, he'll be disappointed with himself. Lewis Hamilton right behind him will see an opportunity.
He needs to pit Verstappen because he's butchered those tyres, and that is going to drop him to the back of the field. He was right in the slipstream of Lando Norris. He went to the inside, got on the brakes, and just locked the fronts instantly, and just went sailing on. Sailing on.
It's a brave decision to make a pit stop now. I appreciate that he's got massive flat spots. The vibrations will be almost unbearable. There's another opportunity.
I completely bottomed out.
Okay, so what he's saying is that the car bottomed out. So as he went into the braking zone, he must have hit a bump. Car bottomed out, lifts the front wheels off the floor, and that's what caused that lockup. But he's now in the pits. Jenny.
Yeah, certainly it's pulls into his pit stop, and they lift him up, put on a new set of soft tyres. Max Verstappen wants to go racy. Tell you what, he's bumping all over the place. Those tyres were in a horrible state when he came in, and I saw something flash up about Perez, car number 11.
Russell's going slowly. Russell has hit the barriers, I think. He's got a right rear puncture and is going to be out of the race now. And I think Perez is under investigation for safety car infringement. So whether that is backing off too far behind the safety car, we'll wait and see, because he did do kind of what he did before. Before the safety car lights were out, he dropped way more than the permitted distance back from the safety car. So that could be Perez in a little bit of trouble, potentially. He's still leading the Grand Prix, a second ahead of Charles Leclerc. Sainz is 3rd, Norris is 4th, Ricciardo is 5th, Stroll, Vettel, Hamilton, Gasly, Bottas the top 10. And where is he? Must have hit the wall on the exit of turn 3, George Russell, because he's got has he had a moment with Schumacher? He's gone to the inside of Mick Schumacher into turn 1. Oh, and they've banged wheels. I think Russell is locked up. I know he's gone into a really weird angle into turn 1, trying to attack Schumacher.
What the hell happened there? Okay, plenty of space.
I think I have a puncture or something. I don't know. Russell just crashed into me on the rear left.
Rear left looks like rear left. We have a puncture. Mode punk mix.
Why? It's not necessary.
It looked like it was almost Russell wasn't quite aware. He was looking to the apex of the corner, wasn't quite aware of where the car on the outside was, and they made a collision. It was Russell that came off worse, so I'm sure it'll be investigated. Interesting that Perez is now under investigation for a safety car infringement. We'll keep a close eye on that one.
30 minutes and 15 seconds on the clock, so half an hour to go in the Grand Prix. But Charles Leclerc is closer than he has been for a long time to Sergio Perez, just 0.4 of a second between them in what has been a really, really great fight out at the front. I've enjoyed this a lot. Two drivers just going at it. I'm sure some people will be thinking, oh, we need DRS and whatever, and yeah, okay, there hasn't been much overtaking, but these two have just been pushing flat out for the entirety of the Grand Prix. Schumacher has got damage as well, so he is crawling around. We're not going to have many finishes in the course of this race at the moment, by the looks of things, with less than half an hour to go.
And I'm not sure that the safety car will be finished his duties for this afternoon yet. I mean, that's the nature of this track anyway. As Leclerc gets all squirrely underneath the back end of Sergio Perez, closer and closer, feeling like an opportunity might be getting closer as well, but nothing just yet. Such a difficult place to get past. You've got to take a risk, and in these conditions, taking risks, well, we've seen what it can do. It can lead to absolute disaster on so many occasions. So no one's prepared to just stick their neck on the line just too much. Perez squirming his way out the corner. This is going to go all the way, this fight.
Perez goes in really deep into turn 18. They're both kind of making mistakes at every corner, or they're alternating corners that they're making mistakes on. Perez makes a mistake, then Leclerc has a little slide, and they are 0.4 of a second apart as they come into the final couple of corners and down the start finish straight again. 29 go. Sergio Perez and Charles Leclerc still fighting for the lead. There's just half a second between them. It's been a fantastic fight. The Red Bull's ahead at the moment. Lewis Hamilton had a crash and he's dropped down to 8th place. Max Verstappen had a big lockup and went straight on, so he's dropped down to 12th position. He won't be winning the championship today. It's Perez versus Leclerc for the win.
You're the engine.
Perez is having issues with the drivability of the engine at the moment. So Perez having a bit of trouble. And I don't know if that just means he's lighting up the rears or whether it's something a bit different.
Yeah, typically that's to do with power delivery. So what happens when you put your foot on the throttle? How smoothly does that power come in, or how aggressively? And of course, in these conditions, that's critically important. Now they're on the slick tyres, it's highly likely he's feeling a difference there with less grip on the rear end of the car, that a difference between his throttle application and what's happening at the wheels.
Fastest third sector.
Blue flag to Mick in front. Blue flag. Turn 5. Flashing blues for him.
He didn't get out of the way very well.
Copy.
So yeah, Perez missing out the kind of crucial part of information there, and then they asked, now DRS is enabled.
Wow, maybe.
This is a big opportunity now for Charles Leclerc with the DRS enabled to make an attack on Sergio Perez for the lead of the Singapore Grand Prix. Hamilton is right behind Vettel in the fight over 7th place. Norris is in DRS range of sight. He's having a horrible day out there, and Lando Norris might be able to get ahead of him.
The big problem is you can't go offline. You've got to make that overtaking move stick without venturing too far offline, because it's so wet raw now on slick tyres. This is tricky.
Leclerc is really close to the back of Perez. He's 0.2 of a second behind as they come through the final two corners and out over the start finish straight. 27 minutes to go, and this is the closest the Ferrari has been to the back of the Red Bull in the entire 94 minutes of racing that we've had so far. Hamilton close to the back of Vettel as well. Big slide from Leclerc as he gets on the throttle out of turn 3, and that probably means he won't be close enough for a look into turn 7. Through the right-hander of 5, a little fight with the car, pings open the DRS, and now we'll have a bit more closing speed on the Red Bull, but the Red Bull is quick in a straight line. I've said it before this season, I'll say it about 1 million times again before the end of the season, I'm sure, and probably every lap for the next 13 that we have remaining in this Grand Prix, approximately.
It's going to come down to who doesn't make a mistake, and that's probably the bigger question rather than who does make one. Everybody twitching, squirming, finding it very difficult in these conditions with the slick tyres now on the car and such a wet track outside of the very narrow dry line that's been created. So everybody making small mistakes. It's going to be who makes the biggest one, perhaps, is going to suffer most here.
such a negative man. But no, I completely agree. Absolutely. Less than 26 minutes to go, plus 1 lap. And plus 1 lap means when the clock ticks down to 0, you then get to the end of that lap, and then it's your last lap, if that makes sense. I probably could have explained it better. I'll try again in 25 minutes' time. Through the right-hander of turn 14 comes Carlos Sainz. He is still just 0.8 of a second ahead of Lando Norris in the fight over 3rd position. Great drive this from Norris. They're dropping Daniel Ricciardo like nobody's business. Ricciardo on the soft tyre, which you'd have thought in theory would be both quicker and easier to heat up, but Ricciardo not having the pace at the moment, though he is comfortably ahead of Lance Stroll in 7th position. Hamilton is only half a second back from Sebastian Vettel. Fastest lap of the Grand Prix, set by Sergio Perez. Manages to extend his advantage to Leclerc to half a second.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing actually with that soft tyre, Daniel Ricciardo, saw it a little bit on Friday. We didn't get much long running, but it didn't seem to have much in the way of longevity. It was good for a lap, but even on the 2nd lap in qualifying, a huge amount of performance had gone. Max Verstappen set the fastest lap of the race just a lap ago on his soft tyres, but now already that's been usurped by Perez, who's on the medium. So maybe the soft tyre asking a little bit too much of it to get another 25 out of it to get to the end of this Grand Prix.
Yeah, could be very true. This is a good day for Ferrari in terms of the Constructors' Championship as well, in their fight with Mercedes, because they're running 2nd and 3rd. Mercedes are only going to pick up, 4 points from this Grand Prix as it stands, with the 8th place finish for Lewis Hamilton, whereas it will be 33 points for Ferrari at this rate, with a 2nd and 3rd place finish. Fastest lap at the moment going to Max Verstappen. Hamilton right up
again
behind Sebastian Vettel. Leclerc is right back behind Perez again as they come out down towards turn 14. DRS open, but I don't think he's going to be close enough into turn 14 this time through. But he's right there, little lock up on the right front from Leclerc, but he managed to roll off the brakes and keep it going enough to not lose too much.
Schumacher blue?
Yes, yes. 15 to go.
So what the is he doing?
Have a look at it. The times
I think it must be a back marker.
Is that back markers?
It must be a back marker in there because it's 6 seconds from.
I know that's what the
from
timing
Ricciardo to
screen
Stroll.
says. Oh, there we go. They are moving out of the way, so I think you're right. So Vettel passes back markers. Hamilton follows him through. That is the battle currently for 7th place. Lewis Hamilton desperate to reclaim those positions he lost when he sailed off into the barriers with a massive lockup just a few laps ago. Fastest lap now goes to Charles Leclerc, so it's tumbling. The times are tumbling. The fastest lap times are being swapped around between Perez and Leclerc and Max Verstappen, who's on the soft tyre, but all the way back in 12th place.
Leclerc always having a slide when he gets on the power out of turn 3, which just compromises him a little bit and sends him a little bit too far back from Perez, but this is going to be the closest he's been. He's half a second back from the Red Bull driver as they come up towards turn 7. Does Perez defend? He does not, but Leclerc's not close enough. That looked like a really good opportunity for Charles Leclerc, but didn't quite have the conviction to go for it. Equally, Perez was fairly comfortable in that position. No further investigation between Russell and Schumacher for causing a collision in one of the most, I don't know what the word is, sort of cut and dry causes of a contact that I've seen in my life. But there we go, 22 minutes on the clock. Still, the fight between Perez and Leclerc ongoing.
This is going to be fascinating the way this pans out, because with 22 minutes left to go, I think Leclerc has the faster car here, but he just cannot
lock up from Perez coming into turn 14. You heard the squeal.
Got away with that.
I don't know how he got away with that. Wow.
That was a big one. It's going to cause a big flat spot, and it's also going to give a big opportunity to Charles Leclerc. Now, he'll have seen that happening as he slides out the corner, but he'll be seeing the opportunity ahead of him. He'll see Perez struggling, and that will give him a little bit of extra impetus to go one step further.
Jenny.
Yeah, Max Verstappen at the moment is in 12th place. He has the fastest as things stand, which means he wouldn't get the extra point. No one would get the extra point. But there's still a long way to go in this, and I've got a funny feeling that Perez or maybe Leclerc wants that extra point.
Yeah, well, Verstappen only just took the fastest lap on that last race with a 50.0 because Perez had it a moment. Well, no, I think Leclerc had it a moment ago, so it's swapping around the whole time. But they are Perez and Leclerc are completely. The fastest lap has nothing to do with them at the moment because they're just driving as fast as they possibly can. So if they get the fastest lap, then great. That's an utter irrelevancy at the moment for the front two as they fight for the lead. 21 minutes to go, plus 1 lap, and it's still just nose to tail. Verstappen's right behind Magnussen for 11th. He's not impossible for Verstappen to get a point here. If he gets ahead of Magnussen, he can then close in on Bottas, and then maybe Gasly and Hamilton and Vettel. 7th place is the highest I think that Verstappen can get. I'd be very surprised, maybe 6th for Stroll, but I'd be surprised if he manages to pull that off, considering how difficult it's been for him to make progress through the field. There's no hot knife through butter today for Verstappen.
No, that's right. I mean, the big winners today, the teams that have really done well, McLaren, Ferrari, of course, in 2nd, 3rd, McLaren in 4th and 5th, Aston Martin 6th and 7th, and another big lock-up for Perez. Another big lock-up. So, yeah, those 3 teams all with decent results as things stand. It'll be Red Bull who are suffering most, I guess, with Verstappen. Mercedes had a disastrous day. Alpine in that tight battle with McLaren in the Teams' Championship, also a disaster for them. So a real sort of tale of teams rather than individual drivers today.
That lock-up from Perez was in exactly the same corner as he had the previous lap, and now Leclerc is closer than he has ever been as they come into the final couple of corners. That isn't quite true, actually. He's 4 tenths back. He was 3 tenths back a couple of laps previous, but he's got DRS this time. Coming in towards turn 1, not close enough to make a move there, but if he has a neat exit of 3, he's got a real shot at taking the lead of the Singapore Grand Prix. Less than 20 minutes to go. Back end slides a little, but overall that looked like a smooth enough application of the throttle for Leclerc in 2nd place. The Ferrari driver back on the power, a little far back again, 6 tenths back from Perez. He's going to close and close and close, but maybe still be too far back. He is. Nothing he can do just yet. Charles Leclerc continue to pile the pressure on Perez.
Yeah, and what we're seeing is that the different characteristics of these 2 cars. It's Perez and the Red Bull that have the middle sector, I think, in hand. They've got that under control, and that's where perhaps the overtaking opportunity is. So Leclerc can't make the most of that, and yet Leclerc is clearly faster.
Gasly 2.5 ahead. We need to get him.
Trying.
The opportunities.
We'll be heading to the cricket in 25 minutes, half an hour here on Sports Extra. It's available on the BBC website if you want to listen to it now. But at the moment, Mark Priestley and myself, Jack Nicholls, and Jenny Gao are bringing you coverage of the closing stages of the Singapore Grand Prix. And Jenny Gao is in the pits in Singapore.
Certainly am, and Charles Leclerc will be very aware of the fact that there are an extra 8 points up for grabs for him if he can get past Sergio Perez and if he can get the fastest lap. And 8 points in this championship battle.
From Leclerc. Leclerc nearly went into the barriers, and now he's dropped back from Perez, and he's going to have to do that work all over again. My apologies, Jenny, but I thought he was heading to the wall there. He managed to keep out of it.
No apology needed. As things stand, the gap between him and Verstappen would come down from 116 to 98.
The fight's on. I'm being sarcastic. But nevertheless, that was a big moment there for Charles Leclerc as he tries to close in on the back of Perez. He's doing all he can at the moment.
Yeah, you can't question his, can you? They're giving it everything. And the car's on the ragged edge, and sometimes just over that ragged edge as well, which is what we want to see. It's great for us watching.
He is out of DRS now.
Yeah,
that's going to be one thing that we'll see whether he's now got to work hard to close back in to the DRS range.
But actually, you know, sometimes a couple of clear laps where you're not being hampered by the car in front might just be what he needs to get himself back into the groove, start building his confidence again, start winding up to it, and then approach the car with temperatures under control, tyre temperatures in a good state as well, and then when he gets up close, maybe he can carry that momentum through to make an overtake. He spent a lot of laps being very frustrated with nowhere to go, tucked up underneath the rear wing of that Red Bull.
17 minutes to go. Well, 16 minutes and 37 seconds. Perez is on for the fastest lap of the Grand Prix at the moment. Through that middle sector, he gains 2 more tenths over Charles Leclerc. So the gap now goes up a little in Perez's favour. Now that Leclerc is, maybe now that he's not looking in his mirrors quite so much, Perez is able to focus ahead of himself a little bit and start to gap out a tiny bit to Charles Leclerc behind him. 16 minutes and 10 seconds on the clock. Perez leading, Leclerc second. Hamilton saying these are the wrong tyres, I can't get temperature in them. He's on the mediums. Only Ricciardo's out there on the softs, and he's not exactly setting the world alight. nor is Bottas and Verstappen. I mean, Verstappen is, but he's also in the quickest car. Perez does the fastest lap of the race, but then Leclerc goes quicker than him, but only by 100th. George Russell, meanwhile, in a fight with Mick Schumacher.
Schumacher's offended like it's a race of his life.
Schumacher is, well, they were fighting over 13th place there, so that was where the fight was ongoing. In the end, he did manage to get through George Russell.
Schumacher is technically fighting for his F1 life here, isn't he? Because he doesn't have a drive that confirmed yet for next year. So these kind of performances, exactly what he needs to do. I think if you look at the two at the front, it may have been short of drama in terms of overtaking, but they've both put in impeccable performances. Yes, they've both had tiny little moments here and there, but this is treacherous conditions, very difficult. You've got to say, Perez driven incredibly well. If he manages to hang on to this will be a very welcome result that will boost his confidence that must have been taking a hit recently over the last few races. Leclerc, well, he's matched him all the way. I'm excited to see how the next 14.5 minutes go.
I'll tell you what, this has been such an intense race for those two up in the front. It's just been non-stop attack, hasn't it?
On the limit all the way as well. When in these conditions, you're on the limit.
Lando, high priority, that bump into turn 7.
Yeah, I'm trying. There's nothing I can do. I don't know what it is. It's just random. It changes every lap.
Who are in 4th place, and now if it stays like this, they'll be leading them by 4 points. That's quite a turnaround for a team like McLaren, who have bought a development here for Lando Norris, and Daniel Ricciardo really needed a bit of luck to go his way. The safety car meant he could come in for a cheap pit stop. He bounced up the order. What a great position for McLaren.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think it's all luck. I think I've been in many meetings where we have conversations like this, when you have a moment like that, when everybody decides to go onto the slicks, immediately after that moment is the highest probability of a safety car. You're on a slightly wet track, you've got drivers who have not got tyres up to temperature, got very little grip. There's a very high chance you're going to get an incident, and so that, I believe, is what they've hung out for, and it's paid off this time.
Verstappen's got ahead of Bottas and up into 10th place. The Alpine will continue to be frustrated, though, by how much their reliability has cost them this year. I think Alonso, a few races ago, said it was about 50 points or something. The incident involving will be investigated after the race for the safety car infringement. So that's interesting. So Perez will be investigated after the race for the safety car infringement. Now, hopefully, I'm hoping that means that he'll get a fine or something like that, and it's not something they deem almost important enough to come out with a penalty for during the race, and it'll just be a procedural thing, and he should have stayed closer, or he should have stayed. Yeah. But it's not worth a penalty.
It's not something that's given him an advantage that's led into this potential race win, if that's what it ends up being, is it? So yeah, I hope you're right.
Jenny?
Yeah, it might be that the FAA want to give Perez the chance and Red Bull the chance to have a chat about it. Maybe. And that means that they'd wait until after the race so team representatives could go and speak to the stewards.
12.5 minutes plus 1 lap to go. Perez leading. 1.8 seconds now to Leclerc. So suddenly, as soon as Leclerc, 2.3 seconds now to Leclerc. Leclerc, unless he's sort of backing off, as you say, to have a bit of a run at him in the closing laps. Very, very interesting for Leclerc there that he's just dropped away so rapidly after being so close.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sometimes it can just upset your balance a little bit, upset your confidence, and that can just knock you a little bit. A moment like that, when you've been in that groove, so zoned in to every single corner, can just fluster you a little bit. They're only humans like the rest of us. They make mistakes, and it can affect their performance over the next few laps. The trick, of course, is to getting that out of your mind, getting yourself settled back into that same groove, and maybe just dropping back by a second or two will give him that opportunity to try that. But he's got to start closing in. Here's Lewis.
Currently P8.
That's pretty hard to drive today.
I didn't quite catch the second part of that.
Well, no, I didn't. He was asking which position he was in.
Yeah.
Which is currently P8. I didn't actually hear what he said either. So.
No, it was that. It's something like, I don't know. I'm going to guess because I didn't hear it. But yeah. So, but a frustrating day for Hamilton in what could have been a pole position yesterday, arguably, potentially. Could have been a race win today, arguably, potentially. Not based on anything other than having had pole yesterday, but, a weekend that was looking positive.
And we need to stay within 5 seconds from Perez. He may have a penalty at the end of the race. Safety car infringement for him, for Perez.
So that's interesting. Ferrari telling Leclerc to stay within 5 seconds of Perez because they presumably looked at the rules and potentially, well, or they're just playing it safe.
Yeah, they have to do that. It's a sort of no-brainer that you have to make sure you're covered just in case. I agree with you. I don't think any infringement that we've seen. Let's hear from Perez.
They were under investigation for safety car infringement.
What?
Safety car infringement. Investigation after the race. Let's disappear.
And that's Perez being told the Perez is. I'm not meaning to criticise Perez's engineer here, but he's not very clear. I didn't think he was very clear behind the safety car. Remember your safety car gaps. He didn't say, and we don't get the full radio, of course, but he wasn't explicit with whether to be close or far back.
Yeah.
And then he's just said that weird. It'll be investigated after the race. Let's disappear. What does that mean?
Well, I think Perez knows what that means. It means there's a potential.
I know what it means, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I agree with you. You know, you're always taught that your radio messages.
Let's build a gap more than 5 seconds ahead of Leclerc. So if we do, you know.
Yeah. You're always taught your radio communication in these incidents should be clear, concise, with no more information than the driver needs. But those ones are a difficult one because how much you don't want to tell your driver that he's under investigation. He's going to get angry. He's going to get frustrated. But you do need him to start building that gap. So, I mean, I do agree with you. But I think Perez knows exactly what he's got to do. But I agree with you. I don't think it's going to end in a penalty, or I'd be disappointed if it does, because I don't think whatever infringement it was created an advantage that led to any result in this race changing.
9 minutes and 15 seconds plus 1 lap to go. Into the pits comes George Russell. Very slowly indeed. New set of tyres going on, and out he goes. So
That's his third pit stop, isn't it?
Yeah, so whether that's just for fun for George Russell, I'm not sure. Leclerc made a big error on that last lap and lost 0.7 of a second to Sergio Perez, just at the fastest middle sector of the race so far. So that fight now is sort of dead with the 3.2 seconds gone between them. But Leclerc wants to stay within that 5 second window in case Perez does get a penalty that I would be surprised if he does get. And Verstappen has now caught the back of the Hamilton-Vettel Stroll train.
So Verstappen now the car behind at 5 seconds.
Tyres.
10 lap soft tyres for Verstappen.
Is he passing people then?
He had passed Gasly. Not sure how much of a threat that was. Currently, we think medium is the best tyre.
Well used, as opposed to the medium tyres on the cars of Hamilton and Vettel. But he's also got this tricky situation, like they all have, where it's so hard to step off line to make an overtake happen. Verstappen already tried it earlier on Norris and sailed past and down into the runoff area, costing him a disappointing result in this race. So it's going to be very hard for him to get past, despite having a potentially quicker car.
Right underneath the rear wing of Lewis Hamilton as they come past the Singapore Flyer, flashing through the left-hander in front of the commentary boxes, and then in front of the pit lane, and then in front of the main grandstand down at turn 1. A little nose to the inside for Verstappen, but not enough to make a move. The problem for Verstappen is that Hamilton is within DRS range of Sebastian Vettel at the moment, so that will help Hamilton out a little. In the hander of turn 5, over the bumps and onto the power, through that right-hand turn, and out onto the back straight. Not close enough this
Hamilton
time.
Didn't get DRS that time, but Verstappen did. So he is now starting to close in, just broken the gap between Vettel and Hamilton. So Verstappen, can that DRS do enough? It's not so powerful around this circuit because the straights in which it applies are just not as long as many of the other circuits we go. And that's the nature of this track. It just is difficult to get past. It's not quite Monaco level. We've got wider streets. We've got a longer lap. But it is still very difficult, particularly in these conditions, to find a way through. And that's what's frustrated Max Verstappen, quite frankly, all afternoon, evening.
Night. It's 2 minutes past 11. Mark was wondering earlier there was a chance this race could go into tomorrow, but happily, I don't think we're gonna go that way. But
has it ever happened before?
Yeah.
Anybody on hashtag BBC F1?
A race
started on Sunday and finished on Monday.
The old adage, race on Sunday, race on Monday. 6 minutes and 13 seconds to go, plus 1 lap. And Verstappen is still right behind Hamilton. I wonder how hard these two are going to fight, don't you? In the context of all of last season, I don't think we've had them fighting on track this year.
Yeah, very rare, hasn't it? Absolutely. Onto the start-finish straight they go then for another lap, and still not quite close enough. Hamilton back under DRS range from Vettel, which kind of neutralises that fight because Verstappen equally has DRS behind him. So they're in one of those annoying DRS trains, and nobody can find a way through, with Vettel hanging on to what's got to be said is a decent 7th place with his teammate Lance Stroll.
I know this is difficult, so entry to 6 is good. Exit, you need to be a bit to the right. Whatever you did that lap was good. Keep doing that, please.
But I'm doing the same thing every lap. You're just making me do the hokey pokey.
I understand. It's something weird. Whatever you did this lap was good to do it.
6 seconds ahead of Leclerc. 12 seconds back to Carlos Sainz, who's been nowhere all day, really. Norris in 4th, 5.7 seconds back from Sainz. Norris in, Ricciardo 5th, Stroll 6th. Vettel, Hamilton, Verstappen and Gasly. The rest of the point scorers at the moment, Bottas, Magnussen, Schumacher and Russell. The other drivers still running, Tsunoda, Ocon, Albon, Alonso, Latifi and Zhou, all out of the Grand Prix. Closing stages now, 4 minutes to go. Sergio Perez and Charles Leclerc were having a fantastic fight for the lead, but Leclerc just made a mistake, dropped out of DRS range and has now dropped back to 3.8 seconds behind the Red Bull. So with 4 minutes to go, it looks as though Perez is going to take the win. Still a great fight going on for 7th, 8th and 9th, which is Vettel, Hamilton and Verstappen. 3 drivers with an awful lot of world championships between them, fighting over 7th place, but Perez has been pretty Mark Priestley.
Yeah, brilliant drive from Perez. Equally brilliant up until that mistake from Charles Leclerc. They've both had a hard fight, pushing each other all the way. The sister Ferrari of Sainz is currently in 3rd, although a long way off, but it'll be a good day for Ferrari if they can hang on to this, and a great day for McLaren, currently sitting in 4th and 5th, with Norris 4th, Daniel Ricciardo 5th, taking advantage of a safety car early in this race to make a cheap pit stop, and this could work out really well from them after a difficult start to the race.
6 retirements in this Grand Prix, 3 minutes and 20 seconds to go. Perez lead is now 4 seconds, so he's got what, a lap or 2 to
disappear
in that ever so confusing vernacular.
Yeah, well, he's doing his job, isn't he? He's doing his job. 4.2 seconds now, the lead. Leclerc just really suffering. It may be that he's just lost a bit of tyre temperature, perhaps. Perhaps he's seen the best of his tyres. That gap just opening up more and more. 4.3 seconds now between Perez and Charles Leclerc. That 5-second magic gap is only there as a safety, just in case Sergio Perez should be hit with a penalty post-race. He's under investigation for a safety car infringement. We don't know the exact specifics of what it was yet. I think Jack and I would both be surprised if he does get a penalty, but both of those teams, Ferrari and Red Bull, just giving their drivers a little bit of a hurry up, saying just in case, let's make sure we've got at least 5 seconds between the cars.
Has Singapore delivered another great race? Or what do we, because I'm so torn about Singapore. People love it, and I get baffled why, because nothing ever happens in the Singapore Grand Prix, and it goes on for 2 hours. And today I can't tell if nothing has happened, or actually loads of things have happened, but also nothing yet has happened.
I know exactly what you mean. I've been intensely focused on this race. I cannot wait to see what's going to happen from a strategic point of view. I'm thinking there's all sorts going on behind the scenes, but from the action on track, it's kind of been frustrating, hasn't it? We've seen lots of drivers getting queued up behind the other DRS trains in the latter stages. It's been frustrating on many ways, but fascinating in others.
We've also seen loads of people in the wall, and it's great when you get people in the wall. Here comes Hamilton to the outside of Vettel, not quite able to do it. And by that I mean mistakes are punished rather than actually wanting to see people go into the wall. Hamilton's got offline and Verstappen's got him. Hamilton looked to the inside, coming into turn 8. Not great plan, because he was then on the wet stuff and he just sailed past the apex, and Verstappen is now up into 8th place, Hamilton down to 9th, Gasly in 10th. So can Verstappen get up into 7th position?
And that was always going to be the danger for any who is willing to take a risk. To do it, you've got to step off that dry line. The dry line's so narrow, and on slick tyres, with everything else being wet, that's so incredibly treacherous. Lewis Hamilton finding out exactly how treacherous when he did it, and that moves Verstappen up. But it's going to take another mistake like that, I'm sure, to get Verstappen past Vettel and up into 7th place.
Less than a minute plus 1 lap to go. And it is Perez now coming through the middle sector, so I think we're on the penultimate lap of the race. Perez, in fact, we're on the penultimate lap of the race here, aren't we?
Yeah.
And now Verstappen is, he's about to start his penultimate lap of the race, but yeah, he's desperate to get ahead of Vettel, isn't he? Really pushing here.
Yeah, he's all over the place, twitching out of every corner. Of course, Verstappen on the soft tyre, Vettel on the medium tyre, both up to temperature. DRS for Verstappen down into turn 1 is not close enough. He's going to have to circulate a little bit further and try and look for an opportunity that really is not presenting itself unless Sebastian Vettel does something strange.
Oh, so wide on the way into turn 5 every time, Sebastian Vettel, but he manages to keep it together. Now here comes the DRS attack from Verstappen. He's very close to the back of Vettel, only 4 tenths between them. Aggressively goes towards the inside. Vettel covers it off. Verstappen gets the traction, but he can't afford to do a Hamilton and go to the inside at turn 8 because he'll just slide off. It's still so wet offline, and even just got slightly offline there did Verstappen, and he lost a couple of car lengths as Perez now starts the final lap of the Grand Prix.
They are
that lap was bad.
Well, I didn't. Okay.
Mate, I know. We're just trying to get it under control.
Yeah, I know.
Bury the throttle, they want to, they're desperate to. Verstappen's so keen to get past. He doesn't want to finish in 8th place. He doesn't really want to finish in 7th, but he can see it just up the road, and it's tantalisingly close, but frustratingly far away as they come through the middle part of this final lap of what's been a very long Singapore Grand Prix.
Hasn't it just? Hasn't it just? We were meant to start 3 hours and 10 minutes ago, but here we are. The gap's gone up from Perez to...
Gap 7.3. Bring it home. No questions.
Yeah, 7.5 seconds. Really slow lap on that last lap from Leclerc. A 1 minute 51.1, which is 2 seconds slower than Perez managed. So I don't know what happened there with Leclerc, unless they thought it was the last lap of the race or something, but I'm sure. Perez now, though, is on his final lap, looking for his second win of the season. It's been a real struggle this for Perez this second half of the year. After the win in Monaco, a new contract, and suddenly he started to slip back. Here's his radio.
Push to the line.
Push to the line is the message. And Verstappen is getting Vettel around the outside. Does he get it done? Yes. Max Verstappen gets Sebastian Vettel up into turn 7. But the focus and the glory today goes to his Red Bull teammate. Sergio Perez through the final corner, took the lead off the line, held off the charge of Charles Leclerc and wins the Singapore Grand Prix. Second win of the season for Sergio Perez. Second across the line for Charles Leclerc. Verstappen does not get his championship today. Carlos Sainz finishes 3rd in the other Ferrari.
You got loads of energy. Use energy now to defend the Hamilton is 1 second behind.
And Ricciardo, they're going to come through and finish in 4th and 5th. But a strong drive from Perez as he wins the Singapore Grand Prix, and the championship fight, in inverted commas, goes on. And this is the thing with the Perez, and we'll talk about this more in the podcast, which you'll be able to download later, the Checkered Flag podcast. It's a good win from Perez, no doubt about it, but you just get the feeling if Verstappen were starting at the front, he would have disappeared today.
I think you're right. Yeah, it's been a but that's part of the game, isn't it? On a race like this. Let's hear from Perez.
There you go. Winner.
Vamos, Checo. Unbelievable. What a drive. What an incredible drive. Monaco and Singapore. Incredible. Well done, mate.
This is how we do it, man. We shut our mouth and we work hard. This is the Mexican way. Well done, guys.
That is your best ever drive, mate. That was sensational.
That was awesome. That was awesome.
Well done, man. What a race. So happy. It's been a while, mate.
It's hot up here. Don't know how it was for you.
Well, for those of you listening on Sports Extra, thank you very much for joining us for the Singapore Grand Prix here. Apologies for sending you a bit late to the cricket. Sergio Perez has won the race. Leclerc second, Sainz third. We'll carry on the BBC Sport website. But for those of you listening on Sports Extra, it's time to head to England versus Pakistan. And yeah, fair play to Perez, because he was under so much pressure throughout that Grand Prix. I think that's the most impressive thing on slippery tracks. So difficult, so easy to make a mistake on. We saw lots of mistakes from